In this video, we are joined by the Italiano, Jay Shear, and Mr. C. Moore Duck. We're talking all about the Bob Iger years. We're talking the stock, the financial performance, acquiring various IPs, cinematic universes. This is a topic courtesy of the one and only Mr. Jay Shear. Fantastic, fantastic topic. Up next here on OG 55. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of OG 55. We have a fantastic panel today. We're talking all about Bob Iger. Bob Iger, the Bob Iger years, the financials, the IP, the parks, all of it. We're going to break it down. Before we do, Mr. Italiano, welcome back, sir. How are you doing today?
Doing good. I just got back from Disneyland yet again. Took a little relaxed, kind of chill day in the park, and ready to talk some Bob Iger.
There we go. Where can everybody find you? By the way, you go to the park so much now. I can't do that. I don't know why. I don't have it in me. I can't do it.
Yeah,
I just can't do it.
It's for me. I don't know. It's just because I tackle the day differently each time that I go. So it's not like where I'm doing like everything at once, but I just love the atmosphere. I love the music and just being surrounded in it. And honestly, it's really not that much different than me being in PA. The only thing, it just saves me on a plane ride.
No, there you go. Exactly. That's very, very true. Where can everybody find you on social media, Italiano?
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you can find me right here on my home base on Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There he is. And we got Mr. Jay Shear in the house, host of How Stories Work, Story Geeks, director of No Vacancy. The list goes on. Mr. Shear, how are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing well. I'm finally over. So for a long time, I couldn't come on the show because I didn't have a voice. I was losing my voice for like 2 weeks straight and had to be put on antibiotics and the whole deal. So it is good to be with you guys. It's always a good time. I think it's a fascinating topic because as we talk, we know that Iger's time in office, so to speak, is coming to an end, and not in a fake way this time.
No,
not in a temporary way. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking like, well, what is Iger's legacy, and what does it mean? And so, yeah, we might be the first ones to be talking about it, but that's because this is Orange Grove 55, and we're on top of it. So it's a pleasure to join with you guys. And if everybody wants to check me out, I actually made a new video a couple weeks back on my favorite scene from a lighting perspective, and it's from Citizen Kane. You can watch it on How Stories Work with Jay Shear, and that's where you can basically find me at this point. So
perfect. And I'll be linking that video and that channel down below. Make sure everybody you follow, support. It's Jay Shear. Show some love. Come on. Mr. C. Moore Duck, welcome back, sir.
Hello. Glad to be back with you guys. And I guess this will be a make or break for special access.
That is true. There's a lot on the line, Seymour. Now be careful with what you say, because you don't want to lose that special access, brother. You don't want to lose that special access. Where can everybody find you on social media, Mr. Duck?
Yeah, you can find me on mrduck.social with for all my social media links, such as Threads, Instagram, X, and Blue Sky.
There he is. Mr. Duck is in the house. We actually did a great video, Mr. Duck and I, along with the wonderful Mr. Webba. That actually sounds like a TV show. The Wonderful Mr. Webba. Fantastic. Great little sitcom. No, but about Nintendo Switch 2. Great video. Check it out, everybody, if you're into video games. It was a really fun conversation. But Jay, I'll start with you. This was you brought this to our attention about a week ago, and I thought it's a great topic. Let's start off with Bob Iger's legacy in terms of like the stock and the financials. Like, where do you kind of stand with that? And then I'll go to you, Seymour.
So I did not do my research, and so Seymour will come out with like some killer stats on exactly what Bob Iger's legacy has meant in regards to the financials. But let me just give a little bit of context to like my experience with Bob Iger as it relates to what he's doing with the company, because I started becoming an annual pass holder. Do you guys remember, when I say do you guys, probably only OG remembers this, but do you remember the get in free on your birthday promo?
Yeah, around like 2009 or so ish.
Yes, around 2009. 2009 was the year my wife and I got married too, and I remember going specifically to Disneyland on my birthday because of that free promo. And after that, that was such a good promo because what Disney realized at the time was that we have something that is better than what we are getting attention for. Because there's the Walt Disney parks have ebbed and flowed in terms of its attendance, right? And the birthday promotion was so critical because it kicked off this. How many years has it been now? 16, almost 16 plus years of just, except for COVID, rampant growth in parks attendance, right? And you could say like the parks aren't as attended as they were in 2019, but I mean their profitability is still like ridiculous. I'm sure we'll get into that. And the point to be made there is that like this is what year did Iger take over at Disney?
I believe it was 2006, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So keep in mind, this is a guy who's just taken over the company. He's looking at his assets and he's like, why are there not more people at these parks? Let's give people free access, something that Disney never does. Disney never gives stuff away for free. Let's see what happens when we drive more people to these parks and people fall in love with them, which is what happened. And so I have this like really interesting time because during that time frame, I just finished my MBA. I'm thinking about business a lot. I'm watching the Walt Disney Company operate, and I'm like, this is a well-oiled machine from a parks perspective, and it was throughout the 20 teens, basically, right? And I think that was just such an interesting time in the legacy of this guy who came in and said, I'm going to think about this as a business, but I realize that this business is delivering experiences. And to be able to know that and understand that and then be able to actually accomplish it is pretty amazing. So I'm on the side of, I don't know that this is unpopular maybe for some people, but Bob Iger will go down as one of the best businessmen of this age, so to speak, right? Yeah, and I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about it. But I'm also curious about the financials because I don't know the actual numbers. I haven't looked at the actual numbers, but I know that Disney has been killing it in many different ways. And of course, they've had hiccups here and there. That happens to all companies. Yeah. But maybe we should hand over to Mr. Duck because I'm sure he knows what the numbers are.
Mr. Duck, you sent this. I believe you sent this to me on Twitter the other day. And I guess we can use these graphs as like a jumping off point. That was kind of funny. The newcomer investor, Disney's a dying business, and here's the dying business. It's kind of funny, but I'll let you kind of take over, Seymour.
First, I just wanted to mention that during Bob Iger's first tenure, from it says here 2005, I got him as CEO.
Yeah,
to 2020.
2005.
Yeah, so 2005 to 2020, his first tenure. He increased the market cap of Disney from 56 billion to 231 billion. So I know a lot of people I hear on X saying that he destroyed Disney, but I mean that doesn't look like a company that's been destroyed.
Yeah, you have to turn that chart around. You have to mirror that chart the other direction, and that's still like a poor performing company, not a company that's dying.
Yeah. Hey Bob, can you come over and help me destroy my bank account, please, bro?
Yes.
Yeah, and if you click on that chart, because the numbers are a bit small.
Yeah, I got you.
You can see here since his tenure again, right? This is the revenues that the company was bringing in. In 2024 was the highest it ever generated at 91 billion. Mm-hmm. And so I hear people saying that, we don't spend money at Disney anymore. Nobody likes Disney. They're spending the most they ever did in 2024.
Yeah. They're making money, and you can see here they did take a hit, like you were saying, Seymour, 2020, 2021, which is expected. The parks were shut down.
Yeah, it was COVID, and that was kind of Bob Chapek's era, though.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That's true.
So when Bob Iger came back,
this part just only shows what I've spent throughout the years, and I'll show everybody else.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So ironically, when Bob Iger came back, everything gone back up.
Yeah. Yeah, 2022, he started to go gangbusters again. So
Yeah.
I mean, from the financial perspective, Seymour, they've definitely done very, very well since Iger took over. You know, I know there's complaints, and some of them are valid with the creativity. I know some people don't like the Star Wars stuff, and I'm not 100% happy with all the creative decisions with Star Wars, and even Marvel took a little bit of a dip there during the pandy and stuff creatively, but on the financial end, I mean, this company is not going broke, and it's certainly, I mean, not only is it not going broke, but it seems to be thriving right now. I mean, you're more of a financial guy, Seymour. Am I wrong to say that? I mean, is it? I mean,
Yeah, it's doing perfectly fine. It's doing better than ever. Every year, it's doing better. The only time it ever did really bad was during COVID.
yeah.
By the way, I just for the sake of like all the haters who are going to come in here and say something about inflation or something, right? If you take this 31 billion from 2005, I just did the calculator. Fact check me if I'm wrong. That would be worth 45 billion today. So even if you take inflation into account, he's doubled the revenue of the company.
Incredible.
Since he took over.
Incredible. Yeah, I mean, Bob Iger is, and I agree with you, Jay. Bob Iger is one of the smartest, probably one of the smartest CEOs in modern history. You know, I mean, what he did for Disney that first go before Chapek took over was nothing short of a miracle. I mean, he completely. I mean, Disney was every movie they dropped up until the pandy was $1 billion movie.
Yep.
It was becoming like an expected thing. It was like, oh, another $1 billion movie from Disney. Yep. You know, I mean, it's crazy. And then obviously the pandy hit and things got weird, you know, but even now, I mean, now they're kind of getting back into it. And it's not a coincidence. You know, Bob Iger knows what he's doing. He really does. And he's not perfect. We're going to get into some stuff about him. He's definitely not perfect, but on the money end, he knows how to turn this stuff around. What say you, George? What are your thoughts on the numbers and the trajectory of Disney on the financial end of it?
So if you look at how many acquisitions that has Bob Iger's name attached to it, like you had mentioned, like with Lucasfilm and Marvel and Pixar and Fox, what have you, no matter how you kind of roll the dice at it and say, okay, there's a lot of projects from those companies that since Disney had acquired them, they're not so hot. They're not like the perfect, but you take just the accomplishment of the acquisition itself that Iger was able to achieve, that he was able to get Lucasfilm, Marvel, Pixar, and Fox all under his name that he signed to.
Yep.
That now a stemming point of the Walt Disney Company. That in itself is an achievement of how the financials, as the numbers began to climb, that no matter if something is good or bad, us as fans are always going to check it out anyway. We're always going to be talking about it, whether it's in a positive way or a negative way. But in order to do so, we have to check it out to see if it's something that we like or we dislike. So there's always talk around it. So to be able to do that, guess what? You play it. You know, you either go it on streaming with Disney Plus or you go see it in the movie theater. So in some way, whether it's good or bad, positive or negative, it's always building up revenue. And these bars show that.
Yeah, go ahead, Seymour.
No, I was just gonna say I have some metrics here too regarding specifically like for Pixar. They were able to generate over 40 billion in direct revenue, not counting theme parks and merchandise. And then Marvel over 13 billion in direct revenue, and again, not theme parks and merchandise. And then Lucasfilms, you know, even though we hear a lot that Disney destroyed Star Wars, generated around 12 billion in direct revenue. And again, excluding theme parks and merchandise, which is pretty significant.
It is. And, you know, Star Wars has had its share of problems, but it's been a pretty, on the money end. I mean, even for example, the sequel trilogy, right? I mean, a lot of fans had, and myself included, had a lot of issues with the creative direction with a lot of that stuff. But I mean, there's no doubt on the money end, each one of those films, I mean, even Rise of Skywalker made over $1 billion, you know? So it's interesting. Newcomer investor here continues with Disney took a hit with the double whammy for the COVID lockdowns affecting the parks and scaling their Disney Plus product, huge upfront costs. But lockdowns are over, and Disney Plus is now profitable and poised to start delivering proper results. So this is interesting, Seymour, because you've talked a lot about this, about how Disney Plus is now profitable. But I do see some out there saying that it's not. If you want to clarify that, because there does seem to be like various kind of perspectives, I guess, on that.
Well, first with the chart here, they spent a lot of money on streaming, and because of COVID, they lost a lot of money from the parks. Mm-hmm. So you see the free cash flow going down, and then Bob Chapek spending like the most they ever has spent on content for Disney Plus, and then Bob Iger came back and was like, "We need to focus on quality, not quantity, especially for Disney Plus." Where they were spending a lot of money on garbage, unfortunately, even on like Marvel, like with She-Hulk, and it wasn't good to see. They spent so much money on CGI work for that, and now we're getting a Daredevil, and that you don't need as much CGI work, right? You don't a lot of that you can have good content at like a low expense. It almost to me is like general entertainment for that type of content. They did that with Agatha kind of as well. It was one of the lowest budgets for Marvel, and for what you got and the viewership, that's what Disney needs to do. Not spend so much money on Disney Plus, and where the big budget projects should go on like movies. And you're seeing that shift even with the Star Wars as well. But then again, yes, as going full circle with how Disney Plus is not profitable, Disney likes to share their costs. So a lot of the time you hear excuses, Disney Plus is not profitable yet. Disney never said it wasn't profitable. They all share the costs. So if you have ESPN, you have Disney Plus, or you have Hulu, a lot of the times outside the US, you have the same content. So for example, in Canada, we have Hulu content, and that is being shared across Disney Plus. So it's very hard to go from international use, like, from the cost expense, that it's just much easier for the shareholders to explain to them that, it's one cost. Here you go. Streaming is now profitable. And that's the whole point. Plus, in the end, it's all going to be one service. That's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing them all bundled in together with ESPN, Hulu, and Disney Plus. Outside of US, you're seeing Hulu already built in, and they're trying to get ESPN Plus into international countries as well. And at the end of the day, it's their streaming division. We don't do that for parks and their cruises. We never hear what the profitable numbers for the cruises. It's all one. It's all about experiences. So I don't know why it's different for direct to consumer when they all share the same costs.
Yeah. One more point to be made, and it's more applicable to the previous chart than it was to the one we saw. But the only two times in Bob Iger's legacy that they've seen a slight dip in revenue from a previous year, when I'm talking about the revenue, so the billions that we were looking at earlier, was in 2009. There was a dip. If everybody remembers 2009, that was the financial crisis, the American financial crisis.
The Great Recession, right?
The Great Recession. So we saw a dip there, and then we saw a dip because of COVID. I mean, like the only time that Disney has had a dip in revenue during the Bob Iger era has been related to what you would call significant market factors that not only hit the United States, but were technically global in nature, because the fallout from the financial crisis in America hit a lot of countries worldwide. So it's like, if you bring those up as any kind of hit on the company, again, I've already talked about COVID. He wasn't even in charge of the ship. It's ridiculous. Now I want to double down on something that Seymour Duck is saying too. To look at any streaming service and declare that they should have been profitable within a 5-year period of them coming out is almost ludicrous. I don't think I would argue, I would be surprised, and I would need to look at the data. Seymour, if you have this data, I would find it really interesting. Has any streaming service that is a large major market streaming service, have any of them reached profitability faster than Disney Plus reached profitability?
One besides Netflix, one. and that's Max.
Okay.
And the only reason for that is because of Discovery, because
Yep.
that is cheap reality TV show type of content,
Yep.
and that can be boost up profitability by decreasing the high budget projects that they do at Max. And then a lot of the times they do a lot of fishy things with their numbers where it's like it's HBO, so technically that's not streaming, that's linear. So they take the costs away from that, put it into
Good
linear,
point.
and it makes it more profitable. But yeah, Max is technically after Netflix profitable streaming service because of Discovery.
Yeah, because if you go back in time and you say, okay, well, let's say Netflix for example. Well, Netflix was in the game how many years before Disney was ever even a player in the game? I mean,
Right.
Netflix had, and you're comparing, like, when people will compare subscriber numbers, it's like, well, first of all, once Disney has collapsed all the services together, as Seymour just talked about happening, then we can start comparing apples to apples with Netflix and Disney as two aggregators and producers of content. But you can't say Disney Plus isn't matching up with Netflix. Like, the two aren't even the same service. Like, they're not even trying to be the same service. So I just think that some of those comparisons are ludicrous. And I want to also say, I know that Bob Chapek rushed a lot of what was happening with Disney Plus, and especially sped up the content machine to try and get more content out there. But before that, Bob Iger was the one that, like, if you hadn't launched Disney Plus when it launched, what would Disney have been giving us during the pandemic? You know what I mean? Like, half their business is shut down. So like, even when he's losing, he's making good decisions, to be honest.
Well, no, that's a great point, Jake. That literally this, and this is what frustrates me about about a lot of the park fandom. A lot of the park fandom has this mentality of, like, once we got out of the pandy and the parks were like doing like the big business, basically, right? It was kind of like this idea of, like, why is Disney wasting all their money on the streaming stuff? It's a sinking ship, and they should just pour all that into the profitable end of the parks. But just like a year or two before, the streaming stuff, like you were saying, Jay, was keeping the parks stuff going, because if we didn't have the streaming, the company would have been in a world of hurt, way worse than it was in now, way worse than it was, you know? Yeah. So this is the beautiful kind of nature of, like, this kind of like this, diversified portfolio, right? To kind of keep it in the financial lingo, where one thing can kind of prop up the other things when one thing falls. Mm-hmm. So yeah, during the pandy, there were no parks. So the streaming service carried a lot of weight. Okay. Then when the world got back outside again, okay, then the park started to kind of bolster everything and kind of lifted up the streaming service. But that's what this is supposed to do. That's why Disney is a 100+ year company, because it has those kind of things to fall back on in case they need it. A company like Netflix is just a streaming service.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right? Go ahead, Seymour.
And I was just going to say that Disney, like, their streaming division is only 25% of their revenue.
Yeah.
Compared to their overall business, where Netflix is 100%. Yeah. So it's not not an apples to apples comparison, because you only have a quarter of the company you're comparing. So I see it all the time on X that, Disney Plus is failing against Netflix. Yet you're not talking about ESPN Plus, you're not talking about Hulu, just Disney Plus, which is more like a niche product if you think about it, for the Disney audience and not the general audience. And that's not a fair comparison. So, like, you take a quarter of the revenue and then you only take a third of their streaming services. It's again not apples. So, but yeah, if you I find it very fascinating that it's only a quarter of it, and strived within those 5 years when they launched it, that it's now this big, now profitable. And now Disney is now focused on profitability. They're not focusing so much on growth anymore. They think that they have those numbers. That's why you're now seeing a lot of, unfortunately, price increases.
Yeah.
You also have to take two other things into consideration when you talk about, again, this is under the bracket of revenue. We're not assessing quality content. We're not doing that, right? Exactly. We're going to get to that later. This is under the umbrella of revenue. So we've already proven, thanks to newcomer investor on Twitter. Thank you for your analysis. And based on Seymour's excellent analysis, we've already established that the Bob Iger era from a revenue perspective is phenomenal and even better if you take Chapek out of the equation. But let's talk about what the future of the company needs to look like in order for them to continue making revenue. And for those people who are down on streaming, the reality is go listen to anybody talk about linear TV, talk about network TV, talk about any of the services that are legacy TV. All of those services are declining in revenue. They're still highly profitable, to be honest. Like, let's just be honest. They're still highly profitable, but that is a declining marketplace. So you have to look out to the future and go, if that's declining, where am I going to pick up revenue from? How is the marketplace changing? We're seeing some marketplace changes even in the theatrical releases, right? Fewer people are wanting to go to movies. People like OG and I are like, I don't want to deal with people's behavior. So I'm going to watch movies from the comfort of my own home. And so when you start to factor in those things, you start to look at, well, theatrical performance is doing this weird thing that we're not sure what's going on with it. Then there's also linear, which is slowly dying a very slow death, and it will be a very slow death, and it will probably end up being in the category of radio, where it's always around, but it's not a high profit generator. You have to be looking into the future of like, well, what's still growing? And if you go look at the Netflix numbers, the last Netflix numbers were phenomenal. I was just listening to a podcast on it. If you want to play in that space, you've got to start building that arm. You don't just so. What my point is that Disney went from 0 to 100, or maybe call it 0 to 75. If Netflix is as a 100, really fast. I mean, this is unbelievable for a brand to be able to do that. So I just don't see a comparison that makes any intelligible sense besides saying Disney's doing a great job.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like you were saying, and creatively, yeah, that's a whole other conversation, because there were a lot of pitfalls with the streaming stuff creatively, that the output. But I mean, on a financial level, for them to be where they're at, and it's only the streaming service is only 5 years old. Yeah. It's going to be 6 years in November. Yeah. It's not too shabby, and it's not even their main business, as Seymour always says. This is not their main business. They don't live and die on streaming. It's just one piece. It's one brick in the castle, basically, right?
Exactly.
And I do want to mention though that things are going to change dramatically for Disney, at least for profitability numbers, because they're not going to focus on India anymore. Mm-hmm. And that was a big loss leader for Disney. That is now merged with Viacom 18 and Reliance Industry as one new company, and that is now private. So we might not see those numbers anymore in there, and it's going to be a completely different service, where it's still going to be Disney plus Hotstar, but it's going to be its own service where Disney's in charge. But Reliance Industry and Viacom 18 will fund most of its money, which is what it's going to help with the fundamentals of the numbers for Disney greatly, because now they don't have to spend a lot, because the margins for India, unfortunately, was very, very low. It was like, I think, a couple of cents to get for what you spend in like billions of dollars. Especially, they couldn't even, I think it was Bob Chapek first. They couldn't do the cricket rights, rights league. That. And because of that, they were losing millions of subs. And a lot of people were saying that, people are canceling Disney Plus. It's over. But it was in India, and Disney didn't want to sacrifice numbers, and now all of that's going to be gone. Own private company, and you should see next week, actually, for Disney earnings, it might show up as better profitability numbers.
There you go.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, some very interesting stuff. I think to kind of put a big bow on it, I think Bob Iger on the financial end of things has been a pretty big success. Huge. I mean, it's been crazy. Like, of course, the pandy and that kind of shook things up quite a bit, and Chapek coming in and look, Chapek was on Bob Iger. I get it. That was he kind of threw Chapek to the wolves right before the pandemic. All that's a whole other thing, and that was a huge mistake on Iger's part. A massive miscalculation.
And we should talk about that, to be honest, because it is part of his legacy.
Well, let's do it now. Let's talk about
it now.
Yeah. What are your thoughts overall on that, Jay? I mean, I think we're all on the same page, but go ahead and set the table.
Well, okay. So here, a couple things. First of all, I think that there are a couple areas where you can make very distinct. What word do I want to use? Problems with the Chapek era. I think it's overinflated a little bit by what the marketplace was doing. However, in other words, you'd have to say, was that a bad strategy or a good strategy? And there were a couple cases where it was just a bad strategy. I don't think that I think that the fandom or the non-fandom at this point for the people who just complain about stuff. I think that they actually treated him more negatively than he deserved, if I'm being honest. However, a lot of that was related to how Iger set up the entire equation, right? So the guy basically was like, can you go run up that hill? And by the way, the whole hill is made of a sand dune and it's going to just keep falling on you as you're running on it. Right. That's kind of the metaphor of like what Bob Chapek was essentially trying to do in my mind. But he did institute things, some of which are not fan favorites, but are very good for profitability. And he did raise profitability per guest is skyrocketed because of Bob Chapek and what Bob Chapek did with the parks. So I think that the problem is that for a company that has had a few instances in its history, this is where we'll pull on the Italiano to bring in some of the historical context. There's been a few times when Disney has made it publicly awkward. Right. There was a time when Walt's what was it? His son-in-law took over the company. That wasn't really great. That was not really great.
Ron Miller.
Yeah. So shout out to Ron Miller. He seems like an awesome guy. But like it was like the publicity around the changes in leadership at that time were not great. There were some publicity issues later on in the Eisner era that were not phenomenal. But for a company who likes to keep things buttoned up and go like, you don't need to know the inner machinations of what's going on. Just know that we're like Uncle Walt and we love creating fantastic experiences for guests. And for an amazing 2005 through 2019 era of PR for Bob Iger. Those middle years were pretty rough. As soon as Chapek took over, the publicity about the company and what was going on with the company, partially because in the late 2010s, Disney was one of the most trusted brands on planet Earth when you polled people. And that took a giant hit during the pandemic. Some of that was pandemic fatigue, people wanting to be out of their houses and not being able to, the politicization of pretty much everything that you can imagine.
Right.
But you have to still say about Bob Iger that it is mostly on him. Because he chose Chapek. Chapek was his successor. And not only did he choose Chapek, but he chose not to give him the reins fully. He chose to still have an office in the building where he was. He was still the chairman. He was looking over Chapek's shoulder, clearly publicly not agreeing with what Chapek was doing, which is wild to do. So there's a lot of that I go, you know what? Too much of that made it into the public sphere at a time when Disney was already hurting by people not being able to go to Disney. And some of it's Chapek, fine, because reservations at the park are not cool. But the rest of it was Bob Iger's choices in setting Chapek up. Yeah. And so I think that the most thing it has to do with the legacy of Bob Iger, in my opinion, is that whatever comes next, he can't get wrong. He can't get it wrong. It's not because his legacy will be tied to, could you transition to somebody else? And if he gives it to another person that mismanages it the way Chapek did, I think it's going to be a huge hit to Iger's legacy overall.
Yeah, there's no do-overs this time. He's got to get this right, and that's why it's really good. They got the Seymour. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it the Morgan Stanley guy who's doing this whole CEO succession thing?
Yes. The guy from Nike's not doing it anymore. Yeah,
but I think it's good. I think it's good to kind of not to get Iger out of the room. Obviously, he's going to be in this conversation with the board and all that stuff. But I think it's good to have this kind of like this outsider kind of coming in and doing this for us and helping us out with this, because Bob Iger doesn't have the greatest knack for kind of picking talent. He's great for okay, observing talent and like acquiring talent, and we'll talk about that. But in terms of like, I don't know, the in-house stuff and promotions and stuff, he's been real hit and miss. And Chapek was a huge black eye for him. And the thing is that you're right, Jay. He handicapped Chapek going into this thing. First of all, he took over right before the pandemic was like in full force, which was like so dirty, right? Yeah. He kneecaps him that way. And on top of that, Chapek himself lacked the social and I guess the social and like public relations intelligence to sort of navigate these waters. Like Bob Iger is like the social intelligence Jedi. He knows how to do this stuff, and he can like thread that needle 1,000 different ways, and he can manage it, right? Chapek was not that guy, and you have a problem when you have a guy like Chapek who's really not that likable, and he's from the theme parks, and now he's in Hollywood, where Hollywood is like a very much like a Mean Girls, you can't sit with us kind of industry, you know. Right. So he's not part of the club. He doesn't have, he's not liked. And look, Disney's a studio first, really. At the end of the day, everything stems from the studio. And if Hollywood doesn't like you, you're dead in the water, because that's how you do all your business at Disney. It's all the Hollywood stuff. So he was working with a lot of negatives, you know. But I agree with you, Jay. To Chapek's credit, there were a lot of ideas that he implemented, that he spearheaded, that actually turned out pretty good, that actually Bob Iger was against initially, and then he reversed and actually went ahead and said, hey, you know what, maybe this isn't so bad, like the sports betting and even more adult content on the streaming platforms. I mean, Daredevil Born Again is going to be on Disney Plus. Okay. I mean, that's pretty adult, you know? So
reservations are still in the park. They still do reservations to this day.
To this day, they still do the resis. Yep, exactly. So every Bob Chapek decision was not necessarily a bad one. He bought that massive ship. George, what was the name of that ship that he bought for pennies on the dollar? It was
well, it's now the Disney Adventure. Yeah, I forget the name of it, of what it was prior, but it went. The ship never took off, never set sail, no pun intended, because of COVID, and it just kind of sat stagnant. And he found that he could kind of capitalize on that, and I think that was the best purchase that Chapek did since his time as CEO. My thing with Chapek, and this is kind of like a roller coaster kind of thing, because I'll say something positive about him, but then I'll say something negative, then back to positive. He's just like all over the board with me. Like him starting out into consumer products, I felt like that was his niche, so to speak. I think he did really well at the time when, DVDs and Blu-rays were the hot ticket at the moment, when he would release the Disney movies out from the vault and then take them back a limited time. I mean, that pushed everybody to go into their local, at times, like at the time, Kmart's, Walmart's, CVS, Walgreens, any place that sold the Disney DVDs and Blu-rays. People were buying that shit before it goes back into the vault. Then he got moved to the parks, chairman of the parks, which for me, that was a big no-no for me. I was already bitter about the fact that Tom Staggs was kind of got the short end of the stick when he was supposed to be the next one in line for CEO after Iger was supposed to be done, because I thought Tom Staggs did phenomenal as chairman of the parks. I was not a big Chapek fan for the parks. I felt like, again, it's like he couldn't talk in front of people without having a teleprompter in front of him. It's just, that was just not his thing. He was
awkward,
humor and kind of numbers person. Keep him behind the scenes. You put him in the front of the stage, he's gonna choke, so to speak. When Iger made the decision to appoint him as CEO, I thought, oh dear God, what the hell did he just do? Because I was so used to following Chapek as the parks chairman, I thought he wasn't really my favorite type of person to run parks. How is he going to do this as CEO? Now, under the circumstance, to Chapek's credit, I thought he did very well because of the situation the company was in. I don't think anybody else could have gotten the company through COVID, and
you needed a hatchet man at that time. Essentially,
you really did. But after a certain point, I felt like that should have been stopped. And it felt like because Chapek was the numbers guy and he just did what he did best, and it was the constant cost cutting of everything, cutting the Magical Express, cutting the entertainment. Now, again, going back and forth as the ups and downs, I know in that moment you have to do it. But my problem is, and this kind of falls even on Iger, it's not coming back. So at some point, to Chapek's credit and a little bit of negativity toward Iger, yes, I know. Sorry, folks. I do speak positive and negatively about some of his decisions.
Special access is officially revoked. Bob, yeah, you heard it right, bro. Yeah, we're gonna cancel it. We're gonna cancel special access right now. Yeah.
I felt like in that moment, the way Iger did it, and it was like, okay, the world is in shambles. Peace out. I'm done. Here you go. Here you go. It should have been done in a completely different manner. When Iger came back, I understand he had to speak to how he was going to move the company forward. But again, I get he wasn't going to be the person to say, hey, I was partially involved with this. But I wish that even how that Chapek got let go, I would have at least said, I appreciate what he has done for the time being of the position that I had put him in. And maybe moving on when Iger came back, maybe he would have got a little bit more of a better reception, coming back in. I still think he still did the company wonders. He's still doing the company wonders. I think he is the face that kind of can go out on stage and convince people and schmooze people,
Yeah.
And to his credit, even DeMauro can do that. Now, again, I have issues completely on a whole separate agenda with him, but he still has that finesse that Iger has. Chapek did not. But as I said, I go up and down, back and forth with Chapek and even a little bit to Iger. But as I said, it's not really how you start, it's how you finish. And a big part of Iger coming back was after he realized the decision that he made of how it would end his legacy.
Yeah.
He couldn't go out like that. And that's why whoever they choose as CEO, he will make sure as a part of it. I mean, there's a bigger group of people that's going to make that decision, but he will make sure that before he steps down as CEO, that history would not repeat of what happened back in 2020.
Yeah, they're probably going to do because of the riskiness. I'm thinking they might lean towards maybe like a co-CEO or bring back the president position. So there's a little bit more of a safety net there where it's not like all on one person anymore. I would just bring back the president role. We had that for years. I don't know why they got rid of that. Bring that back. And then if you have Dana Walden as CEO, and then you can even have, Josh Yamaro as president, I'd be okay with that. As long as there's a studio person overall at the top, I'm good, And I think Josh is a smart dude. I just don't think he's capable for to be the guy. And that it starts and stops with him. I think if he's in conjunction with Dana, I think that those two could work well together. But it would also minimize the risk of having another Chapek moment where you have one person and they fall. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you have two people. There's a little bit more of a check and balance there, a little bit more of a safety net. We do know Bob Iger did speak to the CEOs of Netflix, asking, this was a few months ago. I think Seymour, you and I did a video on that where he was asking the Netflix guys, does this structure work for Disney? So they're considering it like a dual CEO role or something like that. And I think something like that or bringing back the president position would really be a smart idea, But yeah, Bob Iger completely dropped the ball when it came to Chapek. What good is it building Disney up if you totally botch the transition and the next person isn't capable to continue on what you built? Yeah. Where the whole thing goes down. I don't want to get dramatic, but Chapek was really kind of fumbling the ball here. You know what I'm saying? It's you had the whole time of 15 years, I think, something like that, from 2005 until 2020, where you were really building Disney up. We got Marvel and Pixar, and it was really chugging along creatively and everything. And it was just unfortunate that he didn't really take the care to sort of get the transition right, where we could have continued that on seamlessly. And I think honestly, I think Iger was a little too concerned about his own personal legacy and how he was going to look and how he was going to go down. So he didn't want to be involved at all with the pandemic. So he figured, you know what, I got to get out of here. I got to dip, and I got to have this other guy take kind of like the fall during this rough patch because Iger knew he was the golden boy in Hollywood. He was looked upon as one of the greatest CEOs. I still think he is, but he didn't want to risk this pandy putting a black eye on that. And I think that in doing what he did to prevent the black eye, he completely cracked his skull. Sometimes, for example, sometimes the cheap comes out more expensive is what I'm trying to say here. He was trying to do the cheap thing and throw Chapek out there and sort of like, I'm going to protect my legacy. At the end of the day, though, it did way more damage because he didn't take the time to do it the right way. Yeah. Before we pivot though, Seymour, what are your thoughts on this whole transition, the first transition from Iger to Chapek?
It was a mess. You guys basically said everything I was going to say, but yeah, in short, it was a mess. It looked like he was looking out for himself and not for the overall company. But now it does look like he's trying to look out for the overall company. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dana Walton becomes CEO. She has the connections in Hollywood, just like Iger did. You know, Iger had the connections with Rupert Murdoch when they bought Fox, and guess who came from Fox? Dana Walton. And I think she's a stronghold. Like I seen the awards where a lot of the, like for Emmys, where a lot of the general entertainment content where Dana Walton is in charge. And they're always praising her, and they're always thankful for her and the team letting them do this type of content. Where I think even before, in the old Fox, I don't think they would have been able to have the budget or the time or the restraints. I've seen a lot of shows that get canceled. Futurama got canceled twice. Family Guy got canceled twice, and now you're seeing all those shows coming back because of Disney.
Right. No, 100%. And the Dana Walton thing's interesting because, like you said, she's worked with Rupert Murdoch, which, I mean, not to get political, but I do think it is part of the equation. Rupert Murdoch is not a lefty. You know what I'm saying? Definitely not. And I think right now, she gets a lot of crap, I think, for being super progressive, and she probably is. I'm sure she is. She's Hollywood. I mean, most people are in Hollywood, But I think that the Rupert Murdoch relationship and Rupert being so positive about her is actually something that we really need at Disney, because I think that would kind of, if she has shown that she can work with both sides. And I think that's what we need right now. We need someone that can kind of like get the job done. You got to work with some conservatives. I mean, it's the reality of this world we live in. You got to work with some conservatives. She obviously knows how to work with the progressives. So the fact that she has that relationship with Murdoch, I think is very, very, in my opinion, I think that's a huge win for her. That's a huge win in the Dana column. I think that's going to come in handy. You don't want someone who's going to be super, super polarizing, no matter what your politics are, because it just leads to issues with Disney and everything. You got to have someone that's willing to work with both sides. You're just going to have to. Look, we have 4 years right now of Trump. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. You know what I'm saying? If you're a progressive, I know it's not the greatest thing to hear, but I mean, the reality is the reality. You have Tim Cook meeting with Trump and doing all kinds of things to get on his good side. Sometimes you got to play ball with people you don't like. You know what I'm saying? And I think Disney's going to have to do the same. And Dana's relationship with Murdoch, being a conservative, I think is kind of like what we need right now, considering the landscape. That's just kind of where I stand with it. But
and if we take this from what lessons do we hope that Bob Iger learned to solidify his legacy as an amazing leader of Disney, right? Yeah. The two lessons in my mind are you probably need a dual role. And here's why. Because you guys very artfully said this. I'm just going to say it briefly. Bob Chapek, when you look at him on paper and when you look at him in person as he does his spiel, he feels like a COO. He doesn't feel like a CEO. He feels like a guy who knows all the operations and keep him behind closed doors because we don't need him out in front of people talking, as George pointed out, right? Yeah. So there's that piece of it that says if you do need a good COO because he did some great things for what Disney is still doing today. We just talked about that. However, what Iger used to be really good at is that he would have, hey, everybody, there's another price increase at Disney. Yeah, we all know that. But guys, don't worry about the price increase because you're going to get Buena Vista Street. Guys, don't worry about the price increase. You're going to get Avengers Campus. I mean, like he was artistic at coming up with the positive about why you should not worry about the price increase. But Chapek was just like, we're cutting it. Sorry. You know what I mean? Like, it was like there was no salesmanship at all. No. So I hope that what Bob Iger takes away are two things. The first thing is, if you're going to go and hire somebody who's really good at the COO kind of style, please do what George and Seymour and OG all referenced and pair that person with a good people person and make it a dual role. Please do that because the Disney company excels when that happens. Frank Wells, Eisner, phenomenal. Walt, Roy, phenomenal. Do it that way. The second thing I hope that Bob Iger takes away from this is that the studio and the entertainment drives everything. It does not start in the parks. All the fans that love to be out there and be like, oh, the parks. You can't start it in the parks because the IP needs to be developed from an area where people go, I wish this were in the parks, which you don't get very much of. Rare occasions do ever get this, is something starts in the parks and makes its way into entertainment.
Very rare.
But even then, even when you get that, it's been like, how many years was Pirates of the Caribbean around before we got a Pirates of the Caribbean movie? Like, it had to solidify itself in the public sphere. But like Avengers were in the parks, what, less than 10 years after the Avengers came out? So I just hope that there's an acknowledgement that like the studio is going to be what drives all the rest of the business. Is how it's historically worked. I don't see it working differently in the future.
I have actually a great clip. We always play it on the channel, but Jay, just to hammer home your point here.
The real heartbeat of this company was, is, and will always be the film business.
Perfect. I mean, the nephew said it. I mean, exactly what you were saying. It's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. You know, if you don't have the studio, that literally it's the heartbeat of the entire thing. It pumps everything. So you have the great IP, you have the great movies, the great TV shows, the great characters. That's what fuels your theme parks. That's what fuels your cruise lines. That's what fuels your streaming service. I mean, it literally feeds everything. Yeah. And if you don't have that in check, you're dead in the water. You are absolutely dead in the water. So yeah, well said, Jay. Well said. Okay, so let's now, speaking of IP, we're gonna pivot to cinematic universes. We're gonna pivot cinematic universes. So Disney bought Marvel.
Really quick, bro, you've said pivot twice. I'm sorry. You just.
Oh yeah. I don't think Jay has seen our pivot. Jay, I have a K-pop freaking transition for like everything. So here's the pivot drop. I'ma let you pivot. There we go. Super shameless. It was so funny. We actually had Theme Park Wizard on the channel, right? And I play that, and he goes, "Can you play that again?" And I'm like, "Oh, look at Wizard, man! I try to check out the girl, right?" Yeah. He goes, "That guy's neck. I want to see his neck." Like, what are you doing, Wizard? You're the only person looking at the dude's neck. I don't know.
That's awesome.
I love Wizard.
Shout out to Wizard. He's the best.
Absolutely, love his energy. But yeah, so cinematic universe. So Disney buys Marvel, I think in like 2009, I believe it was 2008, 2009. They buy Marvel. They kick off this incredibly successful cinematic universe. The cinematic universe thing was like the belle of the ball, to kind of keep it in the Disney theme. From like when they bought Marvel to like really like the pandy to like Endgame. I mean, this thing was like every studio wanted to like sort of duplicate that magic. Warner Brothers really tried, and they just could not get it done. They still having some issues and stuff. But like, yeah, I mean, the cinematic universe was the thing. You know what I'm saying? But now, I don't know. I feel like it's sort of falling out of favor. I feel like the cinematic universe thing, I think we're starting to see some cracks in it, because when Marvel was doing hit after hit after hit after hit, the cinematic universe thing is perfect, right? Because you have the movies and they all tie together, and then it kind of incentivizes you to watch the next thing, and it's perfect. But once you get into a kind of a rut where the content isn't hitting, you have a couple of movies that aren't that great, the whole train kind of falls off the tracks then, because now you have a whole bigger cinematic story, and you have movies now that people are kind of like, well, I don't want to see that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like now you're derailing the whole thing. Also, what it does, it also overwhelms people, where like once they started introducing like the Disney Plus shows for Marvel, people were like, well, this is a whole connected universe. I don't have time to sit down and watch a Falcon and Winter Soldier. So if I don't watch the show, I can't watch the movie yet.
Right.
So people were staying home, I think, in a lot of cases because they weren't caught up. So that was another downside to the cinematic universe. It got kind of too big for its own thing, and it sort of like did itself, and it kind of imploded. So obviously they're still doing the cinematic universe thing, but Marvel is also doing stuff now outside of that. I think it's called Marvel Spotlight, if I'm not mistaken, Jay. That was the Echo show.
Oh,
where,
yeah, sure.
Right, where it was separate from the main universe and stuff like that. I think it's called Marvel Spotlight. I could be wrong with that, but they have a whole division now dedicated to things that are not the main universe. I think that's very smart. I think you're going to want to do that going forward. You don't want everything super tied together, but yeah, I don't know. But Jay, I mean, this is a fantastic topic that you brought to my attention. What are your thoughts on cinematic universes, and are they still viable? I mean, should they even bother anymore? Or?
Yeah, so two things. One, when you look at it from the perspective of Bob Iger's legacy, you have to say that it was phenomenal. Because again, if we're talking about Bob Iger's legacy, we're not talking about what will happen in the future necessarily, because studios change their strategies, they change what they're doing. There'll be other things that are greenlit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for what Bob Iger did, so what's interesting to me, I think there's pluses and minuses to what Bob Iger has done entertainment wise. And this is going to have some crossover into the acquisitions conversation. So absolutely. I apologize for doing that, but Disney's bread and butter and what Walt kind of set up was that he pulled stories from the zeitgeist of fairy tale worlds, right? And he said, okay, I'm gonna pull. I mean, you could make a very easy argument that Walt Disney actually didn't have a lot of original content back in the beginning, because he was pulling from different fairy tales all over the place, or different books, like Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, absolutely. Peter Pan, all of these books, right? So the concept that Disney has consistently pursued is we might tell our own original stories like Fantasia and things like that, even though those are multiple fairy tales pulling from multiple types of things as well. But we are going to take content that works and we're going to Disneyfy it. Has always been kind of the legacy of Disney. And I feel like that what Iger did with Marvel and the cinematic universe concept, and I think what he did with Lucasfilm is one of the reasons why you either love or hate it, is because when Disney Disneyfies something, it does take away from the original concept. If you go and read the original Little Mermaid fairy tale, it is like this tragic, horrific thing, right? And Disneyfied it so they can sell merchandise, right? That's what they do. And so I think that happens with Star Wars. It happens with Marvel. The Marvel stories can get pretty intense, but Disney Disneyfied a lot of those Marvel stories. In fact, the Infinity Gauntlet series, if you go read the comics, which I did after I had seen the movies, it's this crazy love story where Thanos loves a character named Death, which is now Aubrey Plaza in the cinematic universe, and is trying to impress Death and can't impress her because he really just wants to be on a date with her. And so he's like, well, I'll just take over the universe, I guess, then. I'm going to get the Infinity Gauntlet and do whatever I want. I mean, that's a wild story, right? Yeah. And what do? We say, no, that's not really what the general population wants to see. The general population wants to see something different. And so we change it into what Disney puts out in Infinity War and in Endgame. And I think that, so I feel like what has worked really well. What's the future of it? Is that Bob Iger's legacy to worry about the future of it? I'm not sure it is, right? Like, so if I'm just assessing it from a Bob Iger legacy perspective, I'm like, the guy knocked it out of the ballpark. Just take anybody else trying to sell, create these large cinematic worlds, of which there have been successes aside from what Marvel has done. nobody has done it like Marvel did it. Nobody's made as much money off stuff as Marvel did. The only person that comes close is probably the Lord of the Rings stuff, which, by the way, the Lord of the Rings stuff did by the way, also based off of something else, right? So Marvel was based off comic books. Lord of the Rings was based off the J.R.R. Tolkien novels. It is something to me that I don't think it's going to be as big moving forward. I don't think it can be, because I don't think that studios can take those kinds of risks.
Exactly. It was lightning in a bottle in a lot of ways.
It was lightning in a bottle. Yeah, it was. It was absolutely lightning in a bottle. But as far as Iger's legacy is concerned, I mean, he's batting 1,000. I mean, you could argue that it kind of tailed off near the end, right? You could kind of argue that. And that would be a valid argument. But again, that's you're arguing from a quality standpoint. You're not arguing as the CEO head of a company that made a lot of money. Did he do something wrong? I mean, just so I think it's a difficult argument to make from that standpoint, from a logic standpoint. But I think that what you said is true. I think we're probably coming out of that era, but the champion of that era was Bob Iger.
It was Bob. And here's the thing. I would agree. I don't think it's Bob Iger's responsibility in terms of cinematic universes moving forward. I think Bob Iger's responsibility is fostering a creative environment at Marvel or any of these other studios that Disney owns, fostering a creative environment that can adapt to whatever they need to adapt to. So if the new thing is not doing cinematic universes, set Marvel up where they're equipped to handle moving forward without a cinematic universe, where they can pivot, right? Pivot. I won't play it again, but pivot. They can pivot.
We got to see that guy's neck.
Yeah, we got to see his neck. But they can pivot into that era where, like, what the era of what the audience wants now, right? Yeah. So as long as they can move, they're nimble. They can move from cinematic universe to whatever the next thing that the next generation wants. I think they're good. But yeah, in terms of like Iger and his like responsibility to sort of ensure that like the Marvel universe or cinematic universe continues on, no, I don't think I would agree. I don't think that's his responsibility. I think that you let Marvel evolve in whatever direction that kind of is best for Marvel at the moment and what audiences want.
And to back up what you're saying, going back to the previous topic of Chapek, that was one of my biggest complaints. When I finally had figured out what Chapek had done on the creative side, he killed a lot of the creative momentum moving forward. And that is something that Bob Iger cannot let happen again. Whoever the successors are, they can have their own plans. It doesn't need to be Iger's plan, but they need to have a very consistent vision for what creative projects are going to look like at the Walt Disney Company.
Exactly, Jay. And that was one of the big issues and George brought it up where Chapek doesn't really know. Chapek was not very socially good. He was very awkward, and I think Hollywood really rejected him. Yeah. And that bled into the creativity because you're dealing with Hollywood all day long. You're dealing with big Hollywood personalities. And how do you foster a really good creative environment at your studio when the talent and the executives there that are Hollywood don't like you?
What he did was he put somebody in charge of creative who, again, was not more on the creative side of things. I think I'm giving him credit here, but also realizing that it was a terrible decision. I think what his thought process is I need to moderate this content. I better put somebody else in place who can kind of go like, no, we're not releasing those things. We're releasing these other things and get them out quickly. The problem, I think, is that you can't replace creatives who you think are too politically motivated with non-creatives. You have to replace them with different creatives. And I think that was the problem that he ran into. I think that he thought that numbers could solve everything, and numbers do not solve everything. Creativity has to be a part of the equation.
100%, Jay. And yeah, the Kareem Daniel and Seymour. That's the perfect pivot to Seymour, because I think Seymour perfect pivot because I think Seymour. I think you have some thoughts on the Kareem Daniel decision, but go ahead, Seymour. In terms of Kareem Daniel, the cinematic universe situation over at Marvel and what have you, Seymour. I'd love to hear from you as to what you have to say about this, brother.
Yeah, starting with Bob Iger. Yeah, he did an excellent job with the cinematic universe with Marvel, acquiring them Marvel Entertainment 2009. And how much did I say they make? Had the numbers here. over 13 billion in direct revenue, excluding theme parks and merchandise. So that's it's not
crazy.
bad. But during Bob Chapek era, not so great, and that is partially Bob Iger's fault, that we discussed. Because they were focusing more on quantity and not quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear a lot of like things that superhero fatigue, and I don't believe it's superhero fatigue. I think it's just you gave too much superhero content that was not good in terms of quality. And because of that, that kind of hurt the Marvel brand and Disney as well, because you know, when you have that Disney seal of approval, you know, you're supposed to get that quality, and that got hurt. And I think going forward with the whatever happens, if it's a cinematic universe or if it's just they're going to go in a different way with the new CEO, I think going forward Marvel will be fine as long as they're focusing on quality. They're focusing on, you know, the good creativity that Disney is known for. I think, you know, going forward it's fine. With Chapek and Kareem Daniels, they spent so much money, and I understand why they did it, because, you know, COVID happened and they needed to pump the content for Disney Plus, but they could have done that in a way where they didn't lose as much money and also focus on the quality, because even in the movie theaters, a lot of the movies weren't that good in content as well, and you can see it doing really bad in the box office numbers. For example, like I thought the Marvels was okay, but people didn't like it. They didn't think it was a good storyline, and they didn't think it was part of the cinematic universe. It was like, what was the point of it? We didn't get to learn anything new except for that end scene credit. But besides that, they didn't feel the need to watch it. And hopefully in the future, you know, they create good quality content that happens on either Disney Plus. And from what I'm hearing, they're focusing less on Disney Plus, less releases, so that they can end releases where there's less budget. So like Daredevil, right? So that they can focus on good quality and not as much money to spend on it, so they don't have CGI like She-Hulk all over again.
Yeah.
But then the big budget projects in movie theaters. And I think going forward, if they can consistently do that again, regardless if it's a cinematic universe or not, I think, you know, Marvel will be in the right spot. Especially if you have someone like Dana Walden, who's right now really good in general entertainment. Like I mentioned before, with all the awards, people praise her for the work she does. You know, she was in Fox, she done Fox, you know, she has the track record of everything she done in the previous company. And now with this company, you know, I would have picked her instead of Bob Chapek, but she was too new within Disney. She just got acquired from Disney for buying Fox. And now that she's integrated within Disney much more, I can see that happening going forward. And, you know, kind of reminds me of Bob Iger in a way, because, you know, Bob Iger was from ABC. Yeah. You know, Disney bought ABC. And now Disney bought Fox, and Dana Walden came Fox. It looks like history is repeating itself.
Very much so, Seymour. Very much so. Yeah, my money is on Walden. I really think she's gonna be the one. I think that they might do the whole like president role, or maybe even the co-CEO role. What's interesting, and I think we were talking about this in the DMs. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, about the Disney Park executive shakeup, right? So basically, for those at home, we did a video on it, but to kind of refresh, basically, DeMaro's moving things around. Ken Potrock, he used to be, or he still is, I think, until March. He was president of Disneyland Resort. He's now president of like Disney like events. It's a new role that they gave to him, where he's going to do stuff like sports events and manage like the Olympics, like Disney's role in that. Pretty big stuff, right? And then somebody from the guy Thomas, I forgot his last name. Thomas from Disney Signature Experiences is going to take over for Ken Potrock. But Jay, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on that whole shakeup in regards to the CEO race? Because I was telling George the other day, I'm like, this is interesting that because of the timing of it with the CEO succession of DeMauro sort of like restructuring his division. Do you think this is a move out of desperation? Like he sees that he's losing ground in the CEO race, so he's trying to like impress like the Morgan Stanley guy and all that with some big moves? Or do you think it's more about like he kind of knows he's like got the job a little bit and he's confident and he's making moves to set up the Parks division for success when he eventually gets promoted? Like, what are your thoughts on that whole
Such a
thing?
good question. I'm not sure. And one more thing on Dana Walden before I answer that question directly. Dana Walden, for those people who are like, I'm sick of Disney just regurgitating whatever big properties are out there and not giving us any original content. Shogun, insanely risky projects.
Right.
The show has one English speaking person. I mean, there's a couple other smaller characters who speak English, but like the whole show was like you had to read subtitles, and cleaned up, both great viewership and did really well with the award season. Dana Walden is to thank for that in large part. So huge shout out to Dana Walden for her creative endeavors. Okay. I had a boss one time because we were going through a leadership transition where I worked. And I was saying, do you think that they will hire somebody who retains the vision of the company? And so like we had done all this vision work about what our company was going to be and why we were going to be that way. And I said, do you think we'll look for somebody to replace the CEO and there'll be a person who will like be a champion of this particular vision? And my supervisor, who was one of the smartest guys that I've worked under, shout out to Henry. Henry, I'm sure he doesn't watch this, but if he did, shout out to Henry.
Should we give Henry a big shout out?
Yeah, give him
There we go.
perfect. Henry was awesome. But he said to me, he goes, you know what? It doesn't matter because every new CEO comes in and changes all the things that they want to change because they see the world differently than the previous person. They're trying to leave their mark on everything. They're trying to leave their legacy on everything. So I think it's actually more so a signal. I think I follow your line of thinking a little bit more because I thought that they were going to go for the outside candidate. And I've been saying that this whole time. I did not think they were going to go with an internal candidate. However, I think that what they're doing is I think that they might be setting it up for a dual role because I think that they realize if Bob Iger learned the lessons he needed to learn, he knows I need somebody who understands the studios. That's Dana. I need somebody that understands how to schmooze and be there with the general audience and show up on the wonderful world of Disney and give a really great intro. Guess what? Tomorrow's phenomenal at that. To George's point, George made that point like a half an hour ago, and he's 100% right. Tomorrow's great at that. So I think that these moves may be a signal that it is going to be a dual role, and that is part of like tomorrow saying, look how I could free myself of my current responsibilities to be able to step into something like that. Otherwise, it just feels like Iger would have said like, hey, just let's not do that right now because we got to set it up. I don't want you to make a bunch of moves. We bring in somebody else and they're like, screw those moves. I'm doing my own moves. This doesn't make any sense to me. So I would have said that based on Henry's knowledge that he bestowed upon me when I was working for him.
Well said. Mr. Timur Duck, what are your thoughts on that, brother? On this whole kind of like, structural change happening at the parks right now, or the parks experiences division at the parks right now. What does that mean for the CEO race and tomorrow's kind of place in all that?
I've noticed he's been doing a lot more interviews. He's even done interviews with Jim Cramer on CNBC, and that's not like him because he felt like a CEO, interviewing, talking about numbers, talking about things that growth prospects within the company. Especially, I think they were talking about the cruises more specifically, but it felt like, okay, there's something going up within the company. Maybe he knows he's going to become CEO or at least co-CEO. So now he's doing all these things, or maybe he's trying to push for it. And I'm not against co-CEOs. If it was Dana Walden and Josh, as both of them co-CEO, and then you have under them Hugh Johnson helping with the financial numbers as CFO, that's a great team. Because that's one of the issues I had with Bob Chapek. If he had a co-CEO position with someone else in Hollywood, that would have been a lot better. And I think if he did just parks and you had someone like Dana Walden doing Hollywood, that would have been a perfect match. That's what you're seeing right now with Netflix, and that's been working really well. There's some companies, Paramount right now has 3 CEOs. I don't know if that would work. Well, the people, maybe if you have someone like Hugh Johnson as a third person doing financials, but you could just have him underneath like a CFO. But co-CEO, I think is perfect. I always thought of it would be Kevin and Tom, but that didn't happen, unfortunately. And I don't think that's going to happen in the future.
So you think, not to cut you off, but you think the Tom Staggs, Kevin Meyer thing is...
No, I don't think it's going to happen unless Disney, for some reason, buys up their company. Candlelight Media, I think it's called.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And Moonbug Entertainment. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen unless you buy all of that. And that's quite expensive.
Yeah. Interesting.
But the co-CEO, if Josh and them, if they do a co-CEO position, I would not be upset with that. Because that was the one thing that I did not like with Bob Chapek, is that I don't think he was strong enough to be a CEO, but he would have been strong enough to be a co-CEO.
Well said, Seymour. I'm glad you brought that up. You're absolutely correct. If they had that structure with Chapes, right? You had Bob Chapek and you had a Dana Walden. I think it would be a different story, a different outcome. 100%. Because like you were saying, Jay, he comes off like a COO.
Yep.
So he brings value to the table. It's not like Chapek is like, I know fans, call him an idiot and stuff. He's not a bumbling idiot. He's just in his like financial kind of like lane. He's a money guy. And, you put him at head of Disney where there's expectations attached to a CEO. They want that Uncle Walt thing. They want the more of a Hollywood guy. He doesn't have any of that. So him alone was like, oh my gosh, this guy is like not fit for this. But if he had a Dana Walden or he had a Tom Staggs with him, I think he would have done fantastic.
I think that, he would have done much better with Tom Staggs than Dana Walden, because I feel Dana Walden is still more of that business side, working with the studio. So I think you would have business on top of business. I feel you would have Chapek kind of take over the business side, and then you have like a Tom Staggs, or I wouldn't put Tomorrow with him, even though Tomorrow is a much better kind of orator, so to speak, and knows how to work the crowd. You have to have two people in there that know exactly what they're doing for what their position role is, what's calling for. But I feel you would need a full-on business person and a full-on creative. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I would push back a little bit on the full-on creative part. I don't think we need a full-blown creative, but I think we do need someone in there that understands how to foster creativity. So, like Bob Iger himself isn't like a creative guy. Like he's not gonna, he can't sing or dance or
more of an open-minded. You need more of an open-minded person that knows how to work the product.
Right. You need a person in there that knows how to massage the situation, when to pull away and let the creative do their job, but at the same time also having a firm enough style where the creatives aren't running rampant, where they're like the budgets are like, $400 million for like a Pixar show or something crazy, right? Like you have to have obviously set boundaries with the creatives, but at the same time allow them enough freedom to kind of like do their thing.
I will say though, maybe go a little bit extra for the creatives, like how Tokyo does with their budgets, because they don't give two shits of what their budgets are. So if they want to spend the money on something like a Fantasy Springs esque kind of project, or Lord knows what their cruise ship is going to be like, because the OLC is going to be forking out all the money for it, that I would be okay within reason, without breaking the bank. But I agree with you. Like, don't like spend millions of dollars for just like a stage production, because that's where, in a way, the Hyperion kind of got hurt with it, because you were putting on these big production shows such as Aladdin and Frozen, but it wasn't bringing in no revenue as how much they were putting on, because it was included with the park admission.
Yeah, it's a delicate dance. Obviously, you want to have creative freedom. You want to have enough money to get these projects done. At the same time, though, like you don't want to break the bank where you're spending too much money on stuff where you don't make a profit, and you also don't want to let the creatives run rampant either, because you do need limitation on that as well. So it's a delicate dance that they have to play here. I'm very, very curious stuff. Now, the acquiring the IP thing to kind of touch upon that, Jay, like they acquired with Bob Iger, it was kind of like, it was crazy. Like he got in there, he bought Pixar, which is a great move. Michael Eisner was really mishandling that whole thing. I mean, they were like this close from Pixar walking, right?
Yeah.
Like this close. So Bob Iger comes in, he works a deal out with Steve Jobs and everybody, and it officially brought Pixar into the Disney family. Brilliant move. Now they don't have to pay licensing fees for all that stuff they have in their parks. Awesome. And you inherit all the talent. So now you're not just getting the carton of milk, you bought the whole dang cow, you know? So it was kind of perfect. Marvel, again, I know a lot of Disney purists and stuff, they don't like the Marvel buy. I thought it was great. I think the superhero thing is sort of like the yin to the Princess Yang, so to speak. You have princesses and cowboys and superheroes. I mean, it's very Disney, in my opinion. All that stuff is very Disney. So I think Marvel was a great buy. Star Wars, I honestly, I think it was a great buy as well. Has it been managed creatively like as good as it could? Absolutely not. But I think Star Wars fits very good into the Disney kind of DNA. You have a galactic fairy tale of sorts, pretty much, or Western, really. I mean, that's the great thing about Star Wars. It could be like it's multiple genres. It's not just one, you know. Yeah. But all of those genres fit beautifully in the Disney umbrella. The music, which is also a huge part of Disney's legacy in general. I think Star Wars fits beautifully within Disney. And then we came into Fox, which got a little iffier. I think people were like iffy on that. Obviously, it was great to get the remaining Star Wars stuff. I think it was New Hope. That was like the last thing, and then the remaining Marvel stuff, which is awesome. But overall, though, I mean, Fox had some cool stuff. I think Avatar was a huge win because now you can really expand that with the parks and all that good stuff. Obviously, for the streaming service. It was a huge boon for them, and that was kind of the point I think overall with the purchase initially. Now the only black eye though is our boy Brian Roberts from Comcast. He played some corporate games here, and he was bidding on this Fox thing and got that price way up. I think they paid like $70 billion at the end of the day because he kept raising the price, Brian Roberts, by going in there and counter bidding on it. Look, I mean, smart. I mean, Brian Roberts knows his stuff. You know what I'm saying? He played the game well, you know? So I think that was a black eye for Iger, just a little bit, because I feel like he definitely did overpay and he kind of did get played. But I think at the end of the day, it will work out. So initially, I think it was a negative. At the end of the day, though, I think it's going to be a long-term positive, you know? Yeah. But what say you, Jay? Acquisitions, this was a big part of Iger's legacy, like almost like the legacy almost for him. What do you think about how he handled and kind of did all that?
I think for the time that he was, again, for his tenure, the acquisitions were huge for revenue. And that's kind of blatant because Seymour's already presented us with a lot of that data. I think solidifying Pixar was maybe one of the most important things he could have done, because what it did was it said Pixar is one of the only major studios I know of that is not basing a lot of their content off, a lot of their high dollar production content off of the works of other previous people. Yes, they're doing sequels, and yes, they're doing I get that. That's fine. But I'm just saying, like, Pixar is creating brand new IP all the time. Yep. And IP that goes into parks. I mean, you cannot discount that at all. Marvel is doing something different. Marvel is doing the Disney model that said we'll take from our existing content network. It wasn't Disney's content network; it was just fairy tales. But Marvel's content network was comic books. We're going to pull from those comic books and make good stuff. I think that was a really, really smart decision on Iger's part. We've already talked about that portion of it. I think Lucasfilm, in my opinion, has by far been the most variably handled, because it's not just a disaster. We have gotten some really good stuff out of Lucasfilm. The weird thing about Lucasfilm and Pixar and the fact that they have actually all three are let's be honest though, all three have struggled during like slightly pre-pandemic into now. They've struggled a little bit, and they all seem like they're recovering. Again, probably a Chapek problem, but Iger did greenlight some of that stuff before he left, so it's hard to tell where the fault lies there. So from a revenue perspective, he wins. From a content quality perspective, it's a little bit all across the board, because if you would have said in 2019, how has Disney managed the Marvel IP? There's nobody that would have said that they mismanaged it, right? Because even the haters about like, oh, you've Disneyfied it, you still got your Netflix Daredevil series. You still got your Punisher series on Netflix. You still got some phenomenal stuff that was really, really cool. And even now we're getting Deadpool stuff. So I mean, like, even Disney's adapting to it. So I think that we can say that Marvel was awesome throughout the 2010s. Something happened after that did not go real great, and I don't know what that was. Maybe Iger was not focused enough on making sure the right people were in the right seats on the bus, and the wrong people got in the wrong seats. I don't know what that was. Lucasfilm has been like all across the board. You've got the highs of The Mandalorian, and you've got the lows of, Acolyte. Man, that's, for me, that was a huge low. I thought that series was absolutely horrible. I know not everyone hated it, so if you liked it, don't take my word for it. Just enjoy it.
What was it?
What's that?
What was it?
The Acolyte.
Oh, never heard of it.
Oh, George, I wish I could say that. I'm gonna try to like remove that memory from my mind. Where was I going? Okay, so they've struggled recently. It's hard to know why they struggled recently. We don't know what that's going to look like, but if you just take for the hits that were coming out during the Iger era, man, he was killing it.
Yeah.
The $70 billion acquisition, this is a struggle for me, because I actually thought it was a pretty bad choice to pay that much money for Fox for what they were going to get. However, he's going to make a lot of money. I should say Disney's going to make a lot of money off of Avatar.
Huge. And that's why we're seeing, not to cut you off, but that's why we're seeing them put Pandora in DCA. They are, in a way, justifying or trying to justify more that Fox deal.
Yep.
Because now you're going to put it in a Disneyland Resort. You're going to, I mean, it kind of, it definitely points to, hey, look at what we do. We have all these excellent Avatar movies making $2 billion a pop, and we got this. Now we're building Pandoras all over the world. I'm sure Anaheim's not going to be the last one, so it justifies it way more. But go ahead. I do apologize, buddy.
No, you're good. The other thing that I think is a huge, if you were to take a picture and say where is a lot of money on just sitting on a table somewhere, I would tell you it is sitting on the X-Men table. Because they have not. If you were to tell me, like, how do you revitalize Marvel storytelling from a cinematic universe perspective? I mean, the X-Men are sitting right there. The X-Men is a multiple billion-dollar franchise if you can build it correctly. X-Men has been one of the best. Besides like Spider-Man, X-Men was always way more famous than Captain America. Oh, yeah. I mean, the X-Men are one of the biggest properties you could possibly imagine that's not being done. Not much has been being done with it. So to me, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity there.
So Jay, as a creative, let me ask you your own personal opinion. Mm-hmm. Do you feel Marvel is kind of trying to choose my words wisely?
Go balls to the wall, George.
Wasting their time with the Doomsday and Secret Wars when they're trying to kind of pull back the reins and say, okay, well, let's bring back RDJ and let's bring back Chris Evans, but let's bring them back in a twisted new way to kind of see if the audience will go. Why worry about that stuff? They had their moment. Let them keep their moment. Mm-hmm. Have Endgame be what it was called, Endgame. Yep. And now let's move on with the X-Men, with the Fantastic Four. That would be my main priority than working backwards with going back to the Avengers again.
I could not agree with you more. And that is actually, you can learn that lesson from comic books. because comic books have always had, here's the main storyline that's been going on for 40 years, and they keep changing kind of minor stuff here and there, and then they have these giant reset periods, or they have these giant side stories, and those are what usually take off, because it is very difficult from a storytelling standpoint. The natural progression of storytelling is maybe best exemplified by what happens in fantasy stories. The first story is about this very personal journey that this character is on, where they must overcome this evil thing. Think about it as the Fellowship of the Ring. I've got to get out of the Shire, and I've got to get to this next thing, and it's sort of contained, and we follow this like minor set of characters. Then we go, well, we already did that, so now we need to do something bigger. You need to bring on the next big thing. Now it's going to be the Battle of Helm's Deep, and that's the most okay. But we got to go bigger than that. So now it's going to be Sauron. It's going to be he's taking. Oh my gosh, Sauron's crazy. I mean, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And comic books have had this problem for a long period of time. The bigger you get, the further you get away from the intricacies of the characters and the character arcs. And that's what humans really associate themselves to. Yes, these big ideas are cool, but we want to see the character grow into those big things, not just have the big things happen from a plot perspective. And so I could not agree with you more, because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is so big that they're doing multiverse stuff, and it's just getting ridiculous. And it's like you need to rein all of this in, just like we've seen the comics do multiple times by doing resets and reboots. And we need to. So I'm basically 100% on your side here. I think they should totally focus on, because you can build the little intricacies of all the different characters over the next 10 years, and you'd just be a gold mine there.
That basically X-Men would be the history repeating itself of what the Avengers did in the very beginning, but you're using the X-Men. Because when they brought RDJ back on stage, kind of like the unveiling of who's going to be Dr. Doom,
right.
What that actually reminded me of, if you go back to Star Wars Celebration, when they brought the actor out that plays Palpatine. My mind, I can't think of his name. Ian.
What is his last name? Ian McDonald?
Yeah, McDermott.
Dermot. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, gee, with the Star Wars trivia.
Let's do it.
Yes.
So they brought him out on stage, and the fans went nuts. Just like when they brought RDJ back on the stage, the fans went nuts. Yeah. But when it came time for the actual film itself, when they brought Sidious back, it was underwhelming. So when you go back and rewatch the fans' reaction to Ian stepping on stage as the Emperor, that was more of an epic moment than him reprising the role in the film itself. And that's my fear of what is going to happen with RDJ coming back to the MCU, but this time as Dr. Doom. However, the one minor note, if they can hit it right, is if they have Peter Parker facing Dr. Doom. Like, that would be like the one little pebble in the shoe that it can actually work out kind of well. But other than that, I feel like we're having a Emperor moment for Star Wars. And I would go the route for X-Men and Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is Iger's last executive order from the CEO chair will be to buy Sony.
Exactly. There we go.
Yeah.
In grand Iger, one more. In grand Bob Iger fashion.
That's right.
With a bang, you know.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Well, then he gets all the gaming too with the PS5 and all that good stuff.
That's right. Build the empire.
Exactly. So interesting stuff. Now, one of the big things too on the park side of, I'm sorry, I missed Seymour.
Yeah, Seymour. We gotta get Seymour.
Yes. Acquiring IP. I mean, we had a huge amount of IP acquired under Bob Iger's tenure. Probably not going to see another big acquisition before he leaves. Probably not. But what were your thoughts, Seymour, on like Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel, all that good stuff? Fox.
You guys have said everything I was going to say, except that I just wanted to emphasize that going forward, I think 21st Century Fox, or now 20th Century, is going to be the focal point for Disney going forward as a entertainment company for all and not just for kids.
Right.
And which is why I always that's why I'm always assuming that it's going to be Dana Walden, because she was part of that for Fox, and if she becomes CEO or co-CEO, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Especially now with, Jay was saying Shogun doing really well, The Bear doing really well, Only Murders in the Building, and like a lot of the FX shows that are coming in, like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like those shows do extremely well and very low cost. So for business prospects and just having good content overall for everyone, that's the future I see for Disney. Yeah, Marvel, Pixar, and hopefully Star Wars. With Lucas. Hopefully, they might replace someone. I don't know if they're gonna replace her or not. Hopefully she gets there will be like a letter on Disney's investor page, just be like, yeah, I'm leaving with Bob Iger as well.
What's funny is like, because there's that there's that anti Kathleen Kennedy crowd out there, like the very vocal crowd, right? Somewhere in Burbank, they probably have this secret room with all these BAFTA tanks with all these cloned Kennedys just waiting to step up when she steps down, and she's never gonna leave. She's there forever.
After Willow and Dial of Destiny, I thought for sure she was gone.
I like Dial of Destiny. I don't know. Maybe I'm in the minority. I really liked that movie. I did. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
I liked it too, but from a financial perspective,
too expensive.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I mean, by the way, I was telling OG before, I was telling the whole crew before we started playing that I got an Xbox. And by the way, I've never owned a console in my entire life. When I used to play games, I used to play on my computer. So I never owned a console. Finally got an Xbox. The Indiana Jones and the Great Circle game is what the last two Indiana Jones films should have been.
Okay.
And
now that's interesting, because I don't think Kathleen Kennedy had much of a hand in that. Probably not, compared to Dial of Destiny. Does that say something? I don't know. I mean,
we'll leave it to the audience.
Exactly.
To determine what they will.
I'll just say for you right now, she knows shit.
well, it's interesting because Mando was also one of those big hits for Star Wars, but I feel like she wasn't as involved in that, at least in season 1.
Yeah.
And that turned out, I think fans really love that. So I'm not putting her down, because I think she's one of the greatest producers. I mean, obviously, and she's a brilliant woman. I mean, but sometimes you can be a great player, but not a great coach, or vice versa. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's a lot of that. Yeah, no, I prefer someone new too. I mean, I'd put like Favreau or somebody else in there. I mean, he's a Hollywood guy. I think he'd be great. But I do think
her ass on the streets. We're good.
But I do think though, Jay, you're on something with that game. Like, it's interesting to me because like Lucasfilm, that was a Lucasfilm. They didn't third party that, did they? That was in-house, I believe. Or I don't.
That's a good question. I believe it has a Lucasfilm. Yeah, it's a Lucas. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna look it up because I don't know off the top of my head.
While you look it up, Jay, actually, you're not the only person who has said that about the game. Many people were comparing the games to the last two films, and they said, "Wow, this is a great game. Why couldn't we have this in film form? Like, why couldn't this have been the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, or why couldn't this have been the Dial of Destiny?" And I would still take the Dial of Destiny over Skull.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I feel like, again, the hype that was put on this film, and I feel bad for Harrison Ford because he was very passionate. Like when I saw him at D23 when they brought him out, he was very emotional.
Yeah.
That for this film, and he was very proud of it. And honestly, for that note, I will say, kudos to him for his age and what he can still accomplish and do as an actor.
Yeah.
But just the film itself, I feel like what they do a lot of times at Lucasfilm, they try to overwork something to where it ends up just becoming nothing in the end. And I wish that wasn't the case with Indiana Jones, because Indiana Jones is one of my favorite film franchises ever. Dare I say it, I actually like it better than Star Wars, to be honest.
That's fair. The problem with the problem though with Indiana Jones, and we're digressing a little bit here, but the problem with Indiana Jones compared to Star Wars is something that you can do forever because it's a vast universe. You have all kinds of stories, multiple.
I think for me, I think that's one of the problems.
Well, but what I was going to say though is it's good though because you can let it can live on forever. Indiana Jones is just Harrison Ford.
No, I know, but I mean, like with Star Wars, for me, I think again, too much is too much. Sometimes I wish that they would kind of just take a little bit back, and rather than keep on making these different variations of stories, like let it breathe some.
Yeah.
But I do get what you're saying. Like you can't go anything further beyond Indiana Jones, and I wouldn't want anybody else to be Indiana Jones than Harrison Ford. But I would maybe consider doing like an Indiana Jones kind of like animated series.
Hey, I'd be down for that. But a good one, like Batman the animated series.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. It can't be like, yeah.
And the guy who does the voice from the game sounds just like Harrison. It's so crazy. He sounds just like him.
Wow.
By the way, it's a licensed. It's not Lucasfilm.
Oh,
it was developed by Machine Games and published by Bethesda.
Interesting.
Licensed. Yeah.
But really quick before, because I know you want to pivot to parks. I just have one last thing I wanted to say about like the Disney animation / Pixar thing. This is going to be very telling with Elio and Hoppers because those are two original films coming out of Pixar.
Right.
Since them doing like a lot of the sequels, and even with Disney animation, I think they said that in 2026 there's going to be another original Disney animated film, original than coming off of Wish, because a lot of the times we've been getting the sequels for like Frozen. We're getting Frozen 3, we're getting Frozen 4, we're getting Zootopia 2, we're getting Incredibles 3. So it's going to be very telling to see how they perceive original content moving forward out of the two animation studios.
Well, it really is Pete Docter's moment, right? Like if he can pull this off, if Hoppers and Elio can be massive hits for Pixar, that's huge for him, because now he's showing that not only can he make sequels and have them hit and have them be financial home runs like Inside Out 2, but he's also a new IP. Obviously we know he's a very creative guy, right? But I mean, in terms of running Pixar, it will prove that he can now facilitate and foster that with the originals. And that's what you need to do, because the originals are your new IP. You can't live off of Inside Out forever. Right. You can't live on Frozen forever. Like, you have to create new IP. You know what I'm saying?
Unfortunately, I think during COVID, they released it to Disney Plus. Some of the good ones, like Soul, I don't think it should have been a direct-to-streaming movie.
That I agree with you.
That was a great movie. I love that movie. That was fantastic. Absolutely. I agree, Seymour. 100%. 100%. But
there should be one note made here, too. It doesn't relate to IP and purchasing IP. But this is, I think, a short-term choice. It might be a long-term choice, and I don't know how to reconcile it in my head. But the live-action remakes were a big Iger thing. And I know people love those, and they make a lot of money. I mean, they print money, basically.
Yeah.
I just don't know how often you can go to that well, because I feel like it's a little bit devoid of creativity, and I feel like it's more of a gimmick. It's a gimmick that people pay for, right? So those gimmicks are sometimes worthwhile to do, but it makes me wonder if long-term, if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So I will. That's my only comment about. I know it's not related to IP directly, but it's usage of IP that Iger's basically created a name for himself in live-action remakes.
Oh, 100%. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a big part of the Iger years. And I know it's really tempting for Disney to go in there and do the live-action versions of the mega hits.
Yes.
Right. You're going to go in there and do Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, all the bangers, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with that, though, is that these movies that they're remaking are cinematic masterpieces. Like Beauty and the Beast is a gorgeous, flawless movie, in my opinion. Yeah. It was handled just perfectly. The first animated film to ever be nominated for Best Picture. I'm still bitter that it lost to Silence of the Lambs. To this day, I'm still mad about that. But
why Silence of the Lambs was even nominated, it was
Yeah, oh gosh, Beauty and the Beast was just amazing, but I was so upset when that happened. But here's the thing, it's like if they were to do the live action thing in a more strategic, smart way, I'd be more cool with it. Like, for example, why don't you try to revigorate your animated films that didn't do well initially? So do a live action Black Cauldron. That would be badass, right?
That
like
would be
super dark,
cool.
super cool. Why don't you do a live action like Treasure Planet or something, right? Like these are franchises that didn't do well in their original theatrical release, but now it has a second shot at life. So let's just say you do a live action Black Cauldron, and let's just say like hypothetical, it does $1 billion. Yeah. Now you have these characters now that are now relevant all of a sudden that you can pull from. Instead, though, I think the whole point of these live actions, and I think you kind of touched upon it, Jay, with like, it's the cash cow. It's the cash cow gimmick. Yep. There's no nostalgia in the Black Cauldron. No one cares about it, except for like nerds like us who like, I actually like the movie, but like, what I'm saying? Like the normies aren't going to care, So that's why they don't do it, unfortunately. Go ahead, Seymour.
And just like you said, unfortunately, they're not going to do that because money talks. And if they keep making money off of it, they're going to keep doing it. So if you don't want them to make live actions, don't go watch live actions.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Seymour. Exactly.
Which I don't, by the way, and I don't like them. But people do. People love them. So it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Not all things are for all.
It's like too many. Like when you see too many of the same thing, it's just like, don't walk into the sperm bank.
So I did not like the live action Pinocchio.
That was a weird one.
I didn't see that one.
The ending to that one was really bizarre.
And the quality of it was not up to par. I don't know if that was because they didn't have enough money for budget, which is probably why they brought it to direct to streaming, because it wasn't up to par, or it was COVID. I don't know, but it didn't feel like a Disney-esque quality movie to me.
Yeah, it felt like a Netflix original animated thing, right?
That seemed like to me like a student project film.
Student project.
That a college student would make, because even to Pinocchio, like they made him where he didn't seem like a puppet, he seemed like a CGI puppet, and it was the same qualities as the animated version of himself, but just in 3D format. It was weird.
Yeah, and that was a weird one, and it's very forgettable. Like it was only a few years ago, and already until Seymour mentioned it, I haven't really.
Yeah,
it fell off the map completely.
In those type of movies, they should be. If the quality's not there, I know a lot of people are not going to like it if it gets canceled, but it hurts the Disney brand when you release a movie that's not up to their standard. And that one was. I watched it on my birthday because it was released on my birthday. Watched it with a friend, and I was disappointed. I'm like, this is not Disney. This was not Disney-esque quality. And I was like, happy birthday to me. I got a bad take of a live-action movie.
Yeah, no, well said, Seymour. That one was not Disney's greatest moment for sure. Now we're going to close it out with a couple things on that Iger was overseeing. Number one, the Disney California Adventure 2.0. The reimagining of this park. Now this is something that like I've always loved DCA, even as 1.0. I always saw the potential in that park, even in the theme. I think California is really the only state you can really do that with, because it's so diverse in its cultures, its people, its landscape, geography. I mean, it's like, you have, so much. It's such a melting pot in like so many ways. You can pull inspiration in like a million different directions, right? So there's a lot of that there. So I think that the theme wasn't really the problem. The execution was, I think, in the beginning, but there was potential there. When Bob Iger came in, though, and it was announced in 2007, they're reimagining this park. They're adding Cars Land and World of Color and all stuff. That was one of the best things I think they could possibly do for Disneyland Resort. Because here's the thing. When you have people coming from around the world to go to Disneyland Resort, DCA is always expendable. It's always the expendable thing, right? Mm-hmm. So when it's not quality and it's not up to par with Disneyland, it's very easy to be like, we'll skip that. We'll just do Disneyland. Mm-hmm. But no one's going to Disneyland Resort and skipping Disneyland. So if you can get DCA to be a must visit place, you're guaranteeing visits to both, because no one's going to go just to DCA, no matter how good it is. So if you can make DCA a top-notch thing, you guarantee they're going to go to both now. Where if it's Disneyland's the quality park and DCA is like, people are going to skip DCA, right? So I thought it was really smart for him to do that, to reimagine it. It definitely paid off. I think DCA has seen huge growth since they did that. And yeah, I mean, I think that was I think along with buying Pixar, the DCA stuff was one of his earliest wins. And Oswald, by the way, I love him buying Oswald. That was great. But those three things early on, I think really solidified him for me in my mind. Like, this guy gets it. Like, you know, we got Oswald, Pixar's now part of the Disney family, and DCA is getting a whole $1 billion, renovation. I was happy with it. But George, I know you're a big, parks guy. I don't think you've been to the parks for like 2 hours now or something like that. It's been a while. But what do you think about the DCA decision from Bob Iger?
Yeah, it definitely was the right route that Iger took with it. I enjoy DCA 2.0 more than I have DCA 2.5 right now, if that makes sense.
Okay.
When he kind of revitalized the park again, like you had mentioned, with Buena Vista Street and Cars Land. And again, I know the pier isn't your all-time favorite area, but I love how they kind of intertwined a little bit more Disney into the pier before it became decorated with Pixar. That's where I actually enjoyed the pier a little more, before it became, when it was still Paradise Pier and not Pixar Pier. World of Color, I absolutely miss the original World of Color.
Yeah.
I'm not too keen on World of Color 1. I am very curious about World of Color Happiness. I think that's what it's called for the 70th anniversary. I really wish that they would just kind of bring back the original, to be honest. Because again, kind of going back off of talking about like with Lucasfilm and Marvel and everything, they incorporated that into World of Color. And for me, it just doesn't fit in that kind of show.
No, that's a weird one. I will say, though, not to digress too far, the World of Color Happiness for the 70th, I think the direction, or at least the idea behind it, is a really smart one. The whole basic idea of it, the structure, is utilizing the inside-out emotions and kind of letting the emotions take you through that journey. So when you have sadness, you can play all the sad Disney moments. When you have joy, you can play all the happy Disney moments. I think that will sort of, if done right, huge caveat, if done right, can kind of be similar to the original World of Color, because the original World of Color did that too, where it was segmented. You know what I'm saying? So I think if they do it right, it could be really cool. But I agree with you. I love the original show. Absolutely amazing. Goosebumps every single time.
But I will say, I was in DCA today. That's actually the park that I was at, and I have to say it was quite pretty packed. You know, with Lunar New Year going on and what have you. But I couldn't imagine like what I always kind of compare it that if I'm in DCA and it's crowded, I don't even know if I want to step foot into Disneyland to see how crowded that is, because usually it's like 5 times worse with the crowd.
Right now, though, it might not be, because the Lunar New Year stuff might be pulling more towards DCA. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
It's possible, but it's interesting that you say that, because with all the stuff coming on the horizon for DCA 3.0, with Avatar, with Coco, with the new Avengers attractions, expanding Avengers Campus, and then obviously the expansion with the Disneyland Forward and everything, I do hope DCA becomes its very own, where it can stand by itself without needing the crutch of Disneyland Park. Even though Disneyland will always be the superior one, but I want DCA to have its own identity. And it feels like DCA has gone through so many layers throughout the years, from 1.0 to 1.5 to 2.0 to 2.5.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many different identities of DCA, because they're trying to really configure like what that park really is. And
well, no, you're right, George. And here's the thing, regardless of how, because it's a whole other conversation with Pandora, right? Like, how is that going to fit into a park about California? We don't even know. They might even retheme it when they open Pandora to Disney's Cinematic Adventure, and then it all fits in and it doesn't really matter, right? They might do that, But regardless of the California theme and the weirdness with the alien world, I I think to have one of Imagineering's biggest achievements, which was Pandora, I absolutely fell in love with that land over there in Florida. I mean, it was amazing. Absolutely incredible. To have that, a version of that coming to, of all parks, DCA, huge. That's freaking huge. I mean, that quality. And we're going to get Pandora at night every single night. Animal Kingdom doesn't get that because of the animals. We're going to get a nighttime Pandora every single night in California. It's crazy. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I think Kendrick approves.
Woke up looking for the broccoli.
He's a big California guy. No, but Jay, what are your thoughts on the
Kendrick?
whole? Well, yeah, on Kendrick and who won that by? Was it Drake or Kendrick? No, I think we know.
We all know.
I think we know. I think we know.
Sorry, certified lover boy.
Yes, exactly. But what do you think about the whole like DCA reimagining in 2007 and where it led us today?
I think that, and this is I'm cheating a little bit because I'm going to give you my overall wrap up thoughts in this moment on Iger. You know, when I talk about Iger being one of the best business leaders that I've seen, I'm not saying he's the most creative business leader that I've ever seen.
Right.
Because I don't actually find Bob Iger to be a creative maven, right? Like he's not saying, oh wow, like I have all these, like for example, Michael Eisner gave us Pleasure Island. Now granted, that's crazy. That's a crazy idea. Like what if we had a nightlife oriented area of downtown Disney in Florida? That's what I would call very creative. Right? It's like taking some of your IP and doing something with it that's pretty wild. I think that what Iger has done is he's just said, where is there still money to be extracted? Like this is not giving as much money as it could be. So if you look at the Buena Vista Street 2.0, 2.5, if you look at DCA, it is Iger's grand experiment of how to extract more revenue from California Adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's working. It's slow to get there, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's kind of a cobbled together solution of parts. But the more and more he changes it, the more and more he's extracting money from it, right? So I think that there's that Iger's legacy can be wrapped up in this statement that as a businessman who's overseeing creative activities, his ability to say, that can generate me revenue, that can generate me revenue, that can generate me revenue. If only I could control it, we'd make a lot more money. He's phenomenal at that. Go back to the beginning of this conversation and look at what he's done.
Yeah.
And he's not, and when I say he's not creative, I'm not saying that he's like a David Zaslav, who to me, I don't know Zaslav at all, but he seems much less creative, right? Like, so I'm not saying that, and I'm not even saying that Zaslav is I'm not even saying that. What I'm saying, I'm just comparing the two and saying what are their strengths and weaknesses. I think Iger's strength is saying there is creativity that could be created around these properties to extract revenue, and that would be really good for Disney. So I'm going to do that. Right. And that's what he's doing with DCA. Is what he's done with DCA. I think he's been very successful at it. The Buena Vista Street transition, it cannot be overstated how that changed the park overnight. Because before you walked into that park, it had very cheesy. The Beach Boys were playing. The All the Leaves Are Brown song is playing. Like it was this weird sort of like caricature of California, and
it was almost like if you go to like the Midwest and like all their California stereotypes.
Yeah,
it was like that.
Yeah, it was almost like a roadside attraction.
Right.
Like you would drive by it and be like, does anybody want to see the small California that's all stuffed into this area? And you'd be like, maybe. But and it was, and I actually loved it for what it was, because that's back when I became the original annual pass holder. One of the best things I've ever eaten at Disney was it was part of the earthquake kiosk over by the what was like the harvest area, the harvest farm area, and they had this blueberry milkshake that was one of the best milkshakes I've ever had in my entire life. It was amazing, but it was devoid of what I would call classic Disney magic.
Right.
It was just devoid of that. And it was a kind of an interesting place. And I'm not saying it didn't have Disney magic. I'm saying it didn't have classic Disney magic.
Right.
And when Buena Vista Street opened, it was like, oh my gosh, this is classic Disney magic. And ever since then, they've worked it around to do more and more of that, which I think has been really exciting and really fun. And I think it was just a brilliant decision. Now, did he creatively oversee it? No, but he said we can use creativity, not me, but somebody else can use creativity to go forth and extract revenue from this park and get more people to it and sell more annual passes. And the annual passes are going to go up in value. And he just did that. He did it and he accomplished it. I think it's a phenomenal portion of his legacy, honestly, because it transformed that park in so many good ways.
Oh, 100%. 100%. The Buena Vista Street thing was so brilliant because it's very much California. It's very much in line with the California theme, but it's an amalgamation of LA as seen through the eyes of a Walt Disney.
Yep. And a tribute to the founder.
Yes, exactly. And it's a beautiful bookmark moment because you have at Disneyland, Main Street is his birthplace of Marceline, Missouri, which was an amalgamation of Marceline. It wasn't like a direct lift, but it was like the vibe. It was, is Marceline. And then you go across the way to California Adventure, and now you have later in his life when he's a young man, in his early 20s ish around there.
Yep.
LA when he came here from to California. So it's that perfect bookmarky thing, just beautiful. I love it. I mean, that was one of the most incredible decisions. Whatever Imagineer was like, this is what we should do. I mean, I hope they're still with the company.
A+.
A+. I mean, just absolutely.
We just need a Tam O'Shanter so we can go eat there in the parks.
Come on, let's get a Tam O'Shanter, Actually, what'd be great though, Jay, is I'm surprised they haven't figured out a way to put an In-N-Out, some sort of In-N-Out thing.
Oh,
in DCA.
California? Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that would just be money, dude. I mean, money,
I had In-N-Out for lunch and it was amazing. So yes, please do that.
Incredible. You have that out there in Colorado?
Yeah, I've got one like 5 miles from my house.
What? Oh, that's crazy. I didn't know they went that far out. That's pretty awesome. Go ahead, George. I'm sorry, bro.
Or even like in downtown Disney, like put like an In-N-Out or some sort of fashion, because I know that they're kind of going that route to the classic like 50s kind of like aesthetics like that they're adding into downtown Disney. So if they kind of did like a 50s kind of, like I know they're doing like that 50s diner kind of look, but why not do it to an In-N-Out?
Oh, that's a brilliant idea too, George. Where the mid-century In-N-Out. Oh gosh, you want to talk about money,
dude?
My God, that thing would make $1.5 billion.
Somebody hire George.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually,
they can't hire George because he gives them too much money as it is. They're like, this guy's giving us money. We're just gonna have to. Yeah, you can't hire him.
You can't hire him.
Even if they did, I mean, they probably know where my paycheck's gonna go.
Well, that's true. That's true. Money in, money out, basically, right?
That's true.
That's funny. Now, Seymour, I know you're In-N-Out, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Duck, I know you're not as privy to the California Adventure thing, but overall, they spent like $1 billion to basically reinvent this park. Any thoughts or anything before we kind of move on to the international stuff?
Unfortunately, I'm not in, like you said, I'm not into the details of the parks, but I do have some data agreeing with Jay with how Bob Iger knows how to extract revenue within the parks and generate more revenue. And with what I see with the data here overall, including international, is that the parks and experiences were at 12 billion at 2012, and now it's at 34 billion. So and the only time it actually went down, like we've discussed, right, was during like economic issues like COVID, and that's when you saw the parks go down.
Right.
And I remember how they were doing it like a quarter operating, like open it a quarter of the attendance and then 50% attendance. It was very weird. In Florida, I don't think they did that. I think they just like, it's open. I think in California it was a very different. But Bob Iger, since we're talking about it, he was really good at extracting, revenue from these parks.
And just to double down on that, right? Let's go back to the previous conversation where we talked about acquiring IP. And look how the acquiring of that IP affects the revenue of the parks. Not just because people are buying annual passes, but now you have merchandise to sell.
Yes.
And all kinds of merchandise to sell.
Yes.
He basically looked at something and said, if I acquire this thing, not only will I get the revenue from the actual production of content that people will go to theaters to pay for or sign up for Disney Plus to pay for, but when they come to the parks, they will also pay for more of stuff. I mean, the amount of revenue that he has generated and the potential for future revenue, by the way, is just off the charts.
Oh, it's off the charts. I mean, look, for DCA alone, the upcoming project, we have a Pandora coming, right? Which is going to a huge boon for that park. And ticket sales, merch, the whole 9 yards. You have 2 Avengers rides. Okay, that's like, I mean, come on, the merch with that's going to be crazy. Mm-hmm. And you have Coco, which is a huge, I mean, people love Coco. That's all from the studio side. Yeah. And now it's pumping. Now it's fueling the parks, like you were saying, Jay. So that's why it's like, to kind of go back to the initial conversation early on top of the show, it's all from the studio. Yeah. All of this is from the studio. You know what I'm saying? And also, real quick, too, I wanted to say this, but I forgot. If Dana Walden becomes CEO, she's a Fox person.
Ooh,
that would be one more. That would be one more justification for Iger to say, "Hey, look." Yeah, we spent 70 billion. Well, it was really 50 billion once they sold the sports stuff. It was like 50 billion. But okay, yeah, we spent 50 billion on Fox, but look what we got out of it. We got these Pandora lands that drive revenue and attendance. We got the X-Men, we got the final Star Wars movie, and we got our next CEO out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I can't wait to go on the Shogun the Land ride.
Yeah, exactly.
And then show up to eat at the Bear restaurant, right? Sounds good to me.
It sounds absolutely good to me. And I used to have a, do I still have it? I don't even know if I still have it. I used to have a Peter Griffin. Oh, yeah, here we go.
Oh, my God. Who the hell cares?
There we go. The only Peter Griffin, the only Fox thing I have on my roadcast. You can't go wrong with anything Peter Griffin.
Cannot go wrong.
I would love to have a Peter Griffin. I don't know. I don't know if I'd want him in the parks, but it would be funny. It would be hilarious if he was.
It would be funny if they did like a, like in downtown Disney, if they did a themed like restaurant for Family Guy Star Wars. Yes. And you went there to eat. Like, so it's not part of the parks experience, but it's separate from that. I think we can get behind that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So one last thing before we go to my 2 hour and 5 minute crew. You know,
yes, you're still with us.
You're still with us. Thank you so much. One more final thing: international parks. So on Bob Iger's watch, we got one new park, which was Shanghai. Shanghai. Now it was a controversial move, right? Because it was expensive, and it was delayed. I think Tom Staggs got most of the heat for that, I think, because that was like kind of part of the reason why I think they kind of didn't promote him or whatever, but that's a whole other thing. But George, I mean, Shanghai, I mean, what do you think? I mean, another park in China. Mm-hmm. Was it a good idea, bad idea? The park itself, what are your thoughts?
I think initially, I feel like it was well received up front, and then I felt like in time it kind of started dipping to not where the expectation again was pretty high. But then I felt like it kind of leveled out with everything else. But I felt like there was a little slump right after like the hype of it opening. But I mean, I think honestly, it's really because eventually I would like to visit all the Disney parks internationally. So it just adds another place on the map for me to travel to, and then plus also to not even just to the parks, but just see the culture of China and Shanghai, Hong Kong, Tokyo eventually. But so I think it was a bold move on Iger's part. I feel like, at that time he probably thought, not even thinking of him coming back, that, Shanghai would be kind of his landmark kind of rubber stamp, so to speak. But obviously that wasn't the case. But I do think it was a decent choice. I feel like it was risky because this was the first Disney park in the mainland China, right. I believe.
Yeah, the other one's in Hong Kong.
Yeah. So, Yeah, so I think it did work out. I think it kind of leveled out, but as I said, I think the hype came up right as it opened, and then it just kind of like it peaked and then just dropped.
Yeah, Zootopia looks pretty cool though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As I said, it feels like it came the long way, but I wonder how much that park can kind of stand alone, because even right now Hong Kong is, it's just one park. But I have heard that they are talking of like filing permits for a second park in Shanghai. I
Okay.
don't know if they would actually get greenlit while Iger is still in CEO. I don't know if that's his goal, to kind of say, you know what, I started this. Let me kind of finish it with not one but two parks.
Right.
So we'll just have
We'll
to
see.
wait and see. But all in all, I think it was a good smart move with Iger, and also kind of shows his stance politically of how he can kind of go internationally and talk to different governments to get things acquired. Because I know for a long time a lot of people thought he was going to end up running something like politically.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely. I think he could run for president. I think he's getting a little old now. I think he's like in his late 70s. He doesn't look like it though. He looks pretty young. But I mean, that would be. I mean, you run Disney. You're running basically a small country. I mean, you're dealing with all kinds of heads of state, various other countries for all these parks, the studio stuff. I mean, there's so much involved with it. He could have ran. He could have won. I think. I mean, he's got the chops. He's got the charisma. So he could have won, but he's not going to run for that, I don't think, anymore, but we'll see. But Seymour, what are your thoughts on Shanghai Disneyland? It was 2015 it opened on Bob Iger's watch. Think it was a good move, or?
I think yes, it's a good move and an important move to get into China. Not to get too controversial, but Hong Kong is not really China. It's not mainland China,
Right?
And a lot of American companies are not allowed to be in China. And for Disney to penetrate China, that's pretty impressive. Because like I said, a lot of companies are not allowed in China. You're not allowed to use Google. You're not allowed to use Facebook. And now there's this controversy with TikTok and everything going around, and with Trump. But yet, Bob Iger was able to find a way to bring Disney into China. And that's really good because there's a lot of movies and TV shows that do well in China. They sell a lot of box office numbers, for those movies. And, with their flywheel going around, you can integrate that with the parks. And I think, that was a big move for Bob Iger. And it shows that Bob Iger is able to push boundaries within the company. Yeah. Because not a lot of American companies can go into China and be like, it's fine.
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree. And what it does too is it also solidifies Disney in the Chinese culture a little bit, where like a lot of Chinese they really didn't know a lot of the Disney stuff prior to these parks coming in there, And I think that was a big step to sort of solidifying Disney as a cultural thing in that part of the world. So yeah, huge.
And I know Zootopia is huge in China.
Yeah. And
the upcoming new movie for Zootopia, if you get China behind your back for those box office numbers, it's a hit.
Absolutely. Mr. Jay Shear, Shanghai Disney, what do you think?
It's funny because when I brought up international parks, I was thinking that more parks came out under his tenure. I didn't realize they didn't. However, I think the parks internationally have thrived pretty well under his tenure. So it's not just what parks came out, but how did he maximize revenue at all the other parks that he inherited, basically, as well, right? Sure. I mean, Disney Sea and Disneyland Tokyo, you can't watch a vlog without seeing the massive amount of people that go through those parks all the time. Those things are so crowded. It's amazing. I know that Disneyland Paris was turned around before his tenure because it had some years where it really struggled. But my thought process on Shanghai is Shanghai is really difficult for me because it was a good decision at the time it was made. Now the question is, what is going to happen societally moving 10 years down the road? And for example, China no longer has the world's largest population. that's India. Now, India has far surpassed China. I mean,
Wow.
it's kind of crazy. Chinese population is plummeting, actually. I do think, but the China got a lot richer, and I don't know if India is going to get richer or not get richer, right? Because I mean, we already talked about. Seymour brings up a really good point earlier that there's not a lot of margin in the Indian service for the streaming service, right? Because there's not as much luxury, not as much ability to have buy luxury goods, I would say, in India.
But we know what other activities they're doing.
What are they doing?
Well, because you said
because they're making babies. Yeah. They for sure are. They for sure are. Yeah, because India is like what 1 point something billion now, and China's less than a billion, I believe. I could be wrong about that. I could have the numbers incorrect. It could be 1.6 to 1.3 or something like that. But
well, if China needs someone to help out,
OG volunteers. So I think the question about whether or not he should have done it is, China is a world power now. Will it be a world power 10 years from now? I don't know. They're having significant economic issues right now, though they still retain a lot of power. So I think that it was here's the reason I don't know how to answer this question, and I sort of have an answer of I think it's the right move. I think it was the right move. I think it's good for a lot of reasons. It was definitely the right reason at the time, but we have this cyclical kind of thing where we pursue globalization, where we're more free to move about the world. Everybody's kind of getting along. There's not as many wars. The economic outlook is that we really hope that people in China watch American movies because that's really good for us. In the Fast and the Furious series, until recently, did really, really well in China, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, but we've seen this more nationalistic kind of behavior start to happen, right? Where we say, yeah, we're putting ourselves first and like kind of screw the rest of the world, right? And it's not just us. People think that it's just us. That is not accurate. It is happening around the world in many contexts. And that makes it more difficult to know how international moves are going to be played out. So my long form answer, my short answer, I just made a really short answer. A really long answer is I'm just not sure. I think it was the right move at the time. I don't know what it's going to be looking forward.
Well, that's a fair opinion because, like you said, I mean, we're cool. We're cool with China, but it's not exactly like a lovey-dovey relationship. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like we're cool, but we're not like. It's not like us in like, the UK or something, right? Like it's a different kind of scenario where it could go south. Yeah. And then what do you do? Because now you have a Disney park out there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So the future.
If all of a sudden the Taiwan stuff pops off, I mean, who knows?
You know what I mean? Exactly. And that's the issue. Yeah. It's risky, for sure. Right now, I agree. I think it's a great idea. I mean, great move. It's working out. But yeah, in 20 years, I mean, it could be a different situation with China, so we just don't know. But gentlemen, oh wait, George, did you get your opinion on Shanghai? You did? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure.
I do want to say one thing though, that
sure.
I did find it an interesting idea about India, and if Bob Iger, Dana Walden hears about it, you should license it and partner up with another company like Reliance Industries and create a Disneyland park, for India.
Yeah,
that would be interesting. Yeah.
I see Universal trying to do UK. I'm like, we don't need parks in the UK or South Korea. I think India is where growth is going to be, and that's where you want to be. And unfortunately for Disney, when they tried to do the entertainment side, it was just too expensive, and they realized that, and that's why they have now this new venture, and now you're already working with Reliance Industries, maybe if they're listening, I wouldn't mind seeing a park in India to further growth.
Another big opportunity in my mind is, so we are shifting a lot of production out of China and trying to move it either into the United States, into Canada, or into Mexico. But the United States has some problems operating with Mexico right now, both from a cartel perspective and from this whole like border crisis perspective. It would be pretty cool if Disney could work with the U.S. government and work with the Mexican government to create a park in Mexico, to Seymour's point as well. Mexico is a very wealthy country in a lot of different ways. Difficult to work there because of the cartels and what the cartels are up to. But if we could somehow smooth that out, that'd be another great place to put a park, to be honest.
Yeah, no, well said. And the beauty of this whole thing too is with the cruise lines, you can kind of beta test what areas of the world will do well with a full-blown theme park. So you can dock in Mexico, which they do now with the Wonder. That's what we did a couple years ago. My mom and everybody, our family, did a family trip. But you can dock in these various countries, like you can dock in Australia and kind of get a feel, kind of dip your toe into how the people over there are sort of taking to the Disney brand, and then from there you can kind of make your decision. Okay, maybe we can do a park, you know.
Yep.
And that's where, kind of going way back into the conversation, that's where Chapek's decision on buying that ship for pennies on a dollar, which is now becoming the Disney Adventure, was, I think, one of the best moves that he did make as CEO, because that was one thing he did do his homework on, was look at the demographic in Singapore.
Right.
That cruising is huge, and they don't really have too much of it, and they didn't have no demographic of a Disney cruise in Singapore, but now they will.
Right. Well said. Well said. Fantastic conversation today. Jay, I want to thank you for bringing this topic to our attention. I mean, amazing stuff. Absolutely amazing stuff.
So quick question. What do you give Bob Iger, assuming nothing else happens, scale of 1 star to 5-star review? What do you give Bob Iger's legacy as the CEO of Disney?
If he can stick the landing, which the landing is basically the transition. If he can put in place somebody or two somebodies to like take over and do well, and there's no disaster with these next person or next two people, 1 out of 5 stars, I'd give him a solid 4.75, because I think you set Disney up pretty good. Because one of the things a lot of the Disney purists in our community don't like is like, well, he buys all this non-Disney stuff, like the Marvel, the Star Wars, all that stuff, the Foxes, right? But that stuff is necessary. If Disney was just Walt Disney Productions of 1972, well, you think they're gonna last? You think they're gonna last independent? Nah, dude. I mean, Amazon or Apple or somebody's gonna snatch them up.
Right.
I'd rather have Disney be the only. Right now, they're the only independent studio left. Everyone else has been bought out. Disney has not. They've done the buying, but they've never been bought out. So you needed to buy Fox and all these other entities and ABC and ESPN. Shout out to Michael Eisner for that, to make it big enough that it's harder for these companies. Yes, Apple could buy them in theory, but it's a little harder now to swallow this company, and that's a good thing. So yeah, I would give it 4.75. I think he's done a lot of good things. Not perfect, but overall, I think he's been. I think he's going to go down, as long as he can stick this landing, as one of the best CEOs in entertainment. I really do.
For me, right now, of where he stands is at a 3. I'm with OG. If he sticks the landing at the end, I give him a 4.5.
Nice.
Okay.
My 3 will go to a 4.5 because, essentially, it's not how he's ending his legacy; it's how the Walt Disney Company will continue from that final decision that was under his name. So everything that he has done thus far, right now, he's at a 3 for me, kind of in the middle, not perfect, not completely horrible, but yeah, if he sticks the landing, as OG put it, he would get bumped up to 4.5 for me.
There you go, Seymour, and then Jay. What's your rating, Seymour, for Bob Iger? 1 out of 5 stars.
It's ironic. I see a lot of people on X talking about how Iger destroyed Disney, yet he's older just from his CEO tenure than the actual age of the people complaining that they destroyed Disney. So they haven't even experienced Disney before Bob Iger. He's been in there for over 20 years. And Disney has done really, really well financially, because I'm a guy who likes numbers. I give it a 4.5 out of 5, but being as a CEO though is a 3, so in the middle, like 3.75. If he sticks the landing, then 4.5. or higher if he sticks the landing with the new CEO. But I'm in the middle because, he was great up till into the, he had his up and downs, but he was great until he basically threw Bob Chapek under the bus.
Absolutely. And should we ask John Campea what he thinks?
God,
Yeah.
I sound like a Bob Iger Dick Rider.
There we go.
That's funny. That's a good drop.
Campea is awesome. Campea is so smart, but also the great thing about Campea is sometimes he goes off the rails, so unnecessarily,
That's
fantastic.
awesome.
But what say you, Jay? One to 5 stars.
I am way more positive than you guys are about Iger. I would say the only major mistake that I've ever seen Iger make, I mean major mistake, right, was the whole transition of Chapek and then back.
Yeah.
If he can redeem that with his next choice, I don't see how you don't give him a 5. And here's why. Show me the guy who gets a 5.
Yeah.
Go find the guy who gets a 5, because I'd like to stack him up against what Iger has done, and I'm betting you I can argue that every single time. Now, you could put a Ted Sarandos in front of me and go like, well, he doesn't have any major errors yet. And I go, okay, fine. That's fine. But we'll see where he's at the end of his career, because he's phenomenal. The Netflix chain of events has been pretty amazing, and it's still going really great. So there are other 5s out there, but man, I mean, the problem is, if he has another Chapek, it damages the legacy so badly that it would be almost impossible to give him a 5.
Yeah.
So you can't hurt the company like that bad twice. You know what I'm saying? Like you can hurt the company that bad and recover from it. Great. And I'll go, you had a hiccup. Okay. But leadership is taking hiccups and dealing with it and bringing yourself back up. Think of how many times Disney almost went out of business under Walt. And we all would give Walt a 5. So I would find it very difficult not to give him a 5 unless this next transition is botched. And
100%, Jay, because the transition. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, bro. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm going to make a point. Go
I was just going to say, so where is he to you now?
To me now, he's still at a 5. Because he has recovered everything that went wrong. For the most part, there's a little bit more complaining about Disney than there was pre-Chapek that has continued forward that we didn't see in 2019, 2018. And I do think that could present itself as a longer term problem. But I still think that most of the grifters and the haters get proven wrong almost every single time. Yeah. And so it's not real. They're not real. It's a manufactured complaints. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so I think that there's a lingering issue there, but and that has taken a hit, but I just can't imagine that. I mean, most businesses have taken a hit through the pandemic. So it's like, okay, well, in comparison to other people, how good has he done? I don't know, man. Still is pretty high. Still is really high.
Yeah, it's high. It's really high. And with the grifters and stuff, it's tough too, because it's like, I would agree with you. It's not really it's not real life, because it's been so heavily monetized and so incentivized to hate the Mouse House. Yeah, where it's like they're looking for something to shit on because that's what pays the bills. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's not like a like you're looking at it from an honest perspective. It's like there's a financial gain here to kind of crap on them.
Well, so there's also objective reality versus subjective reality. Like if you say I don't like what Disney, now this is a very different conversation. If we're saying I met Bob Iger once and he was a real jerk to me. Okay, then you might give him a 1 out of 5 because your feelings mattered. I'm not saying that. I've never met Bob Iger. I'm just judging him objectively with the data that I have available to me, right? Right. So I think it's a different equation if you're like, I don't like the direction Disney is going because I love Song of the South. That's my favorite, and they seem to hate it now. That's subjective reasoning. That's not objective reasoning. Song of the South isn't making a bunch of money for Disney. So I mean, come on. So I think that there's different ways of slicing this pie. But I'm saying, as an objective observer of CEOs, man, he's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think he's done really, really well. And to kind of cap it all off too, I was gonna say like the transition is everything. It's kind of like a student, right? If you go through your whole student tenure, you're getting straight A's, you're kuma, was it kuma cum laude? I think it's called, right?
Yeah.
And you're just knocking that stuff out. You're getting straight A's, and you're an ace. And then you get out of college or you get out of university, and then you just tank. You start doing drugs, and you just fail at life. It's like all that school stuff doesn't matter anymore. Like all that whole thing you built while you were a student and you were getting straight A's doesn't really matter anymore because now you couldn't stick the landing when you left, you know? And that's kind of like this, where it's like he can build Disney all he wants and he can be, it can be amazing. But like if you put someone in there that destroys the company or it goes down now, that's tough, Yeah. But I really, honestly, I put the chances of something like that. I put the chances of another Chapek under 5%. I think it's so low. I think they really understand the gravity of this, and I think I think that they have the Morgan Stanley guy, which even like Disney haters and stuff, I've been seeing praise this guy. Like he really Seymour, wasn't it? Was it Nelson Peltz who even said that guy is pretty decent? I thought he came out and said that he. Yeah, I mean. Even Peltz is saying this, So I think it's less than 5% that they get someone in there that's going to be terrible. I think they'll figure it out, So we'll see. But
one last thought about that. I know I've talked too much. We've gone for 2.5 hours, but I do think that there is an argument to be made that part of Bob Iger's involvement in the transition was part of the problem, and it should have been the board. It should have been Iger saying, "I'm letting the reins go." And the board can decide where this goes. At least this time around, it seems like he's involved, and maybe a little bit too much involved. But he kind of has to be now because he was too involved last time. And the board should be making more of these decisions than the CEO should. And you can make an argument. Maybe give him a 0.01% off or whatever you want to give him a star off, because that he was too involved with the board. You can make that argument too. He built the board around himself and made himself very powerful. But those are arguments you could make that I would listen to, but I still think objectively.
Yes, I've heard of that on X that the board is they're yes men.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting stuff. Great topic. Again, thank you, Jay, for that. Amazing. When I got your text, I was like, oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. We're going 2.5 hours on this one, boys.
Absolutely.
So we're all going to lose our special access except for Jay.
Yes, exactly.
You guys keep my special access.
You get to keep your special access. Absolutely. We are off.
If I get 3 passes, you guys are coming with me.
There we go. Absolutely. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, we're off the list officially. No more brunches in Malibu anymore with Bob. Sad day. No. But Mr. Italiano, where can everybody find you on social media, sir?
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky under the Disney Italiano. And, of course, you can find me right here on my home base on Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There he is. Hey, should we look at this guy's neck? Hold on.
I'ma let you pivot.
Dude, let me just say, Wizard would want to look at the neck. Trust me, you're not looking at the neck.
Shout out to Wizard, man. He's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Mr. Seymour Duck, where can everybody at home find you on social media, sir?
First, I just want to say, if you're listening or watching after 2.5 hours, thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And yes, you can find me at mrduck.social, where you can find all my social media links from X, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky.
There he is, Mr. Duck. Absolutely. And Mr. Jay Shear, where can everybody find you on social media, sir?
Go watch. If you care about storytelling, if you care about how stories are told, how movies are made, go check me out at How Stories Work with Jay Shear on YouTube, and give me a shout out over there. What the whole goal for that channel right now is, as I learn more about how to make good films and tell good stories, I'm going to study certain things. So I studied a scene from Citizen Kane. The next one I'm studying is a movie that all of you love, and so I hope you'll love the video. But that way I can learn to be better at it, and you can come along with me in that process. So that's what I'm doing over at How Stories Work with Jay Shear.
Love it, love it. And I will be linking that in the description down below, so make sure you check it out. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of OG55, and until the next time, see you.
Thank you for watching OG55. If you aren't already, consider becoming a member today.